My phone buzzed at 6 in the morning, and for a second, my body thought I had overslept for work. Old habits do not retire cleanly. Then I saw the name on the screen, and remembered I was a widower in Charleston, retired with a suitcase by the closet, and a cruise I had paid for like money could stitch a family back together. The kitchen was dim. The coffee maker gurgled and clicked. A photo of my wife Claire sat by the window, her smile frozen in sunlight. 3 years gone, and I still measured my mornings by the shape of the silence she left behind. The cruise was supposed to be a reset. Alaska cold air, big views, the kind of trip you brag about at church. I told myself it was for the grandkids. The truth was, I missed my son. Ethan was 36, married 2 kids, and somehow farther away than he ever was when he lived under my roof. I wanted a week where we had to share space meals, and time where conversations could not be dodged with a polite excuse and a quick exit. I picked up the phone expecting a simple message about pickup time. Instead, I read a block of text that made my stomach go cold. Plans changed. Dad cannot join the cruise. Vanessa wants only family. We will send pictures. Only family. 2 words that turned my house into a waiting room. I read them again, slower, like a clause in a contract I hoped I had misunderstood. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Anger wanted to jump out first. Hurt wanted to crawl after it. I did not send anything. I used to do compliance work for a regional bank. It was not glamorous, but it taught me one thing that mattered. Panic makes you sloppy. Sloppy makes you easy to beat. So I slowed down. I took a screenshot of the text and emailed it to myself, a habit I never broke. The moment stopped being just a wound. It became a record. My coffee sat untouched. My suitcase sat packed. I looked at the polished dress shoes by the door and felt a hard click inside my chest, like a bolt sliding into place. I called Ethan. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, it clicked, and I felt a brief flash of relief. Then I heard Vanessa. "Walter," she said, sharp, impatient, like I was a wrong number that refused to go away. I asked for my son. She sighed. "Ethan is packing. We are trying to get the kids settled. You got the text?" I said I got it. I said I needed to hear it from him. There was movement on her end, a zipper, a thump, and faintly a male voice. Ethan was there, listening, silent. Vanessa lowered her voice into something worse than anger, that careful tone people use when they want to sound reasonable while they cut you. "This trip is about our family unit. We need time without you hovering. My parents are coming. They are the support we need. Please respect our boundary." Boundary. The word landed like a slap wrapped in a self-help book. I reminded her I paid for the cruise, the flights, the upgrades, the excursions. I reminded her I was the kid's grandfather and Ethan's father. She gave a small laugh. "Money is not the point. You always make money the point. You ask too many questions. You make everything heavy." I stared at the refrigerator where the kids' drawings were stuck with magnets, stick figures holding hands. 4 figures, not 5. A silly detail, but it stung anyway. I asked again for Ethan. Vanessa snapped. "No. We are leaving soon. We have to meet with the onboard coordinator and handle paperwork before we sail. Do not come to the house. The kids do not need a scene." Onboard coordinator, paperwork. Those words did not belong to a simple family vacation. Paperwork meant signatures. Paperwork meant plans that did not include me for a reason. I ended the call myself. The silence afterward felt heavier than the house should have been. I sat there listening to the refrigerator hum and wondering when my son learned that hiding behind a text message was acceptable. My first impulse was to drive over there and force him to look me in the eye. The second impulse was to lash out, to text something sharp enough to hurt back. But cruelty is sloppy. It spreads and stains you. I walked to my study and shut the door. My safe sat inside an old filing cabinet. The latch clicked open, and I pulled out a slim folder Ethan had never asked about. Trust documents, property paperwork, beneficiary forms, the foundation stuff people ignore until it is gone. Tucked inside was a plain envelope with my name written in Claire's handwriting. She wrote it the month before she died. I had promised myself I would not open it unless I truly needed it. My fingers hovered over the seal. I put it back. Not yet. I checked the time. A little after 6:30. Their flight was mid-morning. That meant I had hours, not days, to understand what was happening before they moved whatever pieces they were trying to move. I opened my laptop and did what I always did when something did not feel right. I followed the money, not balances patterns. Two things jumped out fast: a transfer to a payment handle ending with Pike Vanessa's maiden name, and a withdrawal from the account I funded for family expenses labeled consultation fee paid to a law firm I did not recognize. Small leaks, bad timing, quiet confidence. The law firm name stuck with me. Elder planning, asset restructuring, mediation, words that sounded polite and expensive. After Claire died, I signed documents just to keep my life in order. A medical directive, a limited power of attorney that let Ethan step in if I ever landed in a hospital and could not speak. The lawyer called it standard nothing to worry about a seatbelt you hope you never need. Still, paper has a way of growing teeth when the wrong person waves it around. I searched my email for the old paperwork and found the attachment my name in black ink. Ethan listed as agent authority, limited, not broad, not permanent. Yet even a limited door can become an entry point if someone spends money on the right locksmith. Claire used to say, "Trust is beautiful, right up until it becomes an excuse." She watched her own brother turn charm into endless loans, watched her mother forgive him until forgiveness became surrender. Claire never said my son would do that. She would have hated the thought, but she would have hated me being naive even more. I closed the laptop and sat still listening to the house. I could almost hear what she would tell me: keep your head, keep your dignity, and never let anyone rewrite your reality while you are staring at their smile. My throat went dry. They were not just excluding me from a cruise. They were rearranging my life while they thought I was distracted by my own heartbreak. I stood at the sink and ran cold water over my hands until the chill steadied me. I was not ashamed of loving my son. I was ashamed of confusing love with permission. I shoved the suitcase into the back of the closet. Then I packed a smaller bag, keys, wallet, charger, the folder, and Claire's photo slipped into an inside pocket. Before I left, I grabbed a yellow legal pad and wrote 2 words across the top: only family, and underlined them once. If that was the rule they wanted, then I would honor it. Fully, completely, in a way they had not imagined. Outside, the air was already sticky with heat. A neighbor waved like it was any other morning. Betrayal rarely arrives with thunder. It arrives as a text before sunrise. I started my car. In the glove compartment, I felt the brass spare key I kept for dog sitting and emergencies. I had not used it in months. Today it felt like permission and like a warning. Halfway down the driveway, my phone buzzed again. Another polite message from Ethan, asking me to be understanding and promising they would call when they had service. I turned the phone face down and kept driving. Mount Pleasant was not far, but every red light felt like a minute to replay his silence behind Vanessa's voice. Onboard coordinator, paperwork, consultation fee, Pike. The pieces did not fit, and that made them dangerous. If I was not family, then what exactly was I to them? I turned onto their street, neat lawns, trimmed shrubs, the kind of neighborhood people buy when they want to look stable. I had helped with the down payment. I had toasted their future in that kitchen, while Claire still breathed beside me. Now the house looked peaceful from the curb curtains, drawn no movement visible, like nothing ugly could live behind those walls. But I knew better than to trust appearances. I parked and sat for a beat with my hands on the wheel until the anger cooled into something I could use. I walked up the driveway steady and deliberate. My finger hovered over the doorbell, and I realized this was the last time I would come here as a father asking to be treated decently. After this, I would be something else. I pressed the bell and listened to it chime inside. While I waited, I pictured the one paper I was almost certain they were too careless to hide proof of what they were really planning. The door handle turned. The door opened just wide enough for Vanessa to stand in it like a bouncer, one hand on the edge of the frame, the other already holding her phone, as if she were recording evidence for later. Her hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp, and the smell of expensive perfume rolled out behind her, fighting with the faint scent of breakfast and suitcase dust. "Walter," she said, like my name was a problem she had been forced to solve twice in one morning. I looked past her shoulder. The foyer was crowded with travel bags, not just a couple of rolling suitcases for a family of 4. There were garment bags, hard-shell cases, and a stack of tote bags with designer logos. A stroller sat folded by the staircase, like they were preparing for a move, not a vacation. "Where is Ethan?" I asked. Vanessa did not move. "He is busy. We are leaving." I kept my voice flat. I rang the bell. I came here to hear it from him. Her nostrils flared, and for a second, the mask slipped. "You already heard it," she said. "You got the text." "This is exactly what I mean. You cannot take a hint. You push and you turn everything into a confrontation. I let that sit between us. Behind her, I heard a laugh, a woman laughing too loud for this early in the day, the kind of laugh that fills a room on purpose. It did not sound like Vanessa. It sounded older, practiced, and pleased with itself. Vanessa followed my eyes and shifted her body to block the view more. My parents are here, she said. They are helping. We do not need this. Need this. Like I was a leak in the roof. I stepped forward anyway, not aggressively, just calmly like a man walking into his own office. Vanessa put a hand out as if she meant to stop me, then thought better of it, because the last thing she wanted was to be seen physically shoving the old man on the porch. I crossed the threshold, and the house hit me in the chest. Not the bricks and paint, the memories. Claire and I had helped them pick the countertops. I had stood in this foyer holding my grandson when he was 3 months old, while Ethan pretended not to cry. Now the place felt like a stage set. Everything was arranged for someone else's comfort, and my comfort was no longer part of the plan. Ethan appeared from the hallway, sweating through his polo shirt, hair not quite combed, eyes darting. He looked like a teenager caught sneaking out after curfew. "Dad," he said, and he tried to sound irritated. "Why are you here?" "Because I am your father," I said. "And because you sent me a text, like I was a plumber you wanted to reschedule." His face tightened. Vanessa made a sound behind me like a warning. Ethan glanced toward the living room, then back to me, and I saw it in his eyes. He wanted me gone, but he did not want to be the one to say it. "We do not have time," he said. "We are trying to get everyone out the door." Everyone. That word cracked open a door in my mind. I walked past him into the living room without asking. The sound died in the room the way it does when you turn off a radio. 4 pairs of eyes landed on me at once. Loretta Pike stood near the kitchen island with a coffee mug in her hand, dressed like she was already on vacation, linen pants, bright scarf sunglasses perched on top of her head. Her smile was wide, but cold, like she was about to compliment you right before she insulted you. Next to her was Ray Pike, Vanessa's stepfather, a big man with a neat beard and a quiet, resentful stare. He was the kind of guy who liked to talk about discipline and respect, as long as he was the one receiving it. On the couch, feet up on the coffee table I had bought, sat Trent Pike, Vanessa's younger brother. He had the posture of someone who had never worried about a bill in his life, because someone else always worried for him. He chewed gum with his mouth open and watched me like I was entertainment. The room was full of suitcases, not just Ethan's and Vanessa's. Bags tagged with Pike, a garment bag draped over a chair, a diaper bag that looked brand new. This was not a family unit trying to save a marriage. This was an invasion. Ethan hurried in behind me, his voice high. "Dad, please. We were going to tell you." "Tell me what," I asked, and I turned slowly, letting my eyes take inventory. "That I am not invited on the cruise I paid for, or that I have been replaced by your wife's family." Vanessa swept in, chin lifted. "Nobody replaced you, Walter. Do not be dramatic. This trip is stressful enough." Loretta set her mug down with a careful clink. "Walter," she said, putting on a sweet voice, "you need to understand Vanessa has been under a lot of pressure. Ethan too. They need support. They need positivity. This is about keeping the peace." I looked at her. "Keeping the peace by cutting me out." Ray cleared his throat. "We are just helping the kids," he said. "Family should support family." The word family landed again, and it did not include me. Trent grinned. "He is not wrong, man," he said, like we were buddies at a bar. "You know how it is. Sometimes you gotta let the young people have their space." I stared at his shoes on my coffee table. I stared at the gum in his mouth. My hands stayed still at my sides, but inside me something old and hard was coming awake. I walked to the nearest suitcase and read the luggage tag. Vanessa Pike Hayes, then another. Loretta Pike, then another. Trent Pike. My eyes slid to the hallway. A bright envelope sat on the console table near the door, half covered by a stack of boarding passes. FedEx. Thick. The kind of envelope you do not send unless the contents matter. A corner of a paper stuck out, and on it I could see 2 words without even trying. Appraisal appointment. My chest went tight, not from panic, but from recognition. When people planned to borrow against a house, when people planned to shift ownership, when people planned to set something in motion that could not be undone, an appraisal came first. A number in black ink that decided how much could be squeezed out before the structure collapsed. I did not touch the envelope, not yet. Touching it would turn this into a fight. I needed to hear the lie first. "Ethan," I said, and I made him look at me. Tell me why you sent that text. Ethan swallowed. He opened his mouth, and the words came out like a speech he had practiced in the mirror. Dad, it is complicated. Vanessa and I have been under stress. We have been arguing. We need this trip to reconnect. We need privacy. We need only family so we can focus. I kept my face calm. Only family, I repeated. That means her family, not yours. Ethan's eyes flicked to Vanessa. Then he looked down. It means the kid's dad. And Vanessa's parents are helping with the kids. It will make things easier. Loretta nodded, approving. Exactly. Trent made a little sound, amused. And me, he added, because I keep it fun. Vanessa snapped her fingers at him like he was a dog. Trent is here because he needed a change of scenery, she said. He has been going through a rough time. A rough time. I could have laughed. I had spent decades watching men call their own choices a rough time so someone else would pay the consequences. I moved closer to Ethan until he had no choice but to meet my eyes. You did not tell me this weeks ago, I said. You told me the morning of departure. You did it by text. You did it like you were canceling a dentist appointment. Why? Ethan's face went red. He glanced at Loretta, at Ray, at Trent, then back at me. Because you would have made it a big thing, he said, and there was a flash of resentment that did not belong to him. You would have argued. You would have made Vanessa upset. You would have ruined it. Ruined it. The same word Vanessa used, the same rhythm, like they were reading from the same script. Vanessa lifted her chin. You are doing it right now, she said. You come into our home and start interrogating everyone. This is why we needed boundaries. Our home. The way she said it, you would think I had never written a check with this address in the memo line. You would think I had never paid a contractor when the upstairs bathroom flooded. You would think I had never watched their kids so they could go to dinner and pretend they were still newlyweds. I looked at Ethan. When did you decide I was not family? His mouth opened. He did not speak. That silence answered me in a way words never could. Loretta stepped forward, voice turning sharper. Walter, you are being unfair. You are older. You tire easily. You get confused. This cruise is a lot. The excursions, the walking, the schedule. It is better for everyone if you stay home and rest. I felt a flare of heat behind my eyes. Better for everyone. Better for their image. Better for their plans. Better for whatever that FedEx envelope had to do with the appraisal. I kept my voice low. I am not confused, Loretta. I have handled bank audits, regulatory exams, and fraud investigations. I can handle a cruise. Ray snorted. Bank stuff is not the same as travel, he said. Besides, Ethan needs to be the head of his household. He cannot do that with you hovering. Head of his household. He said it like Ethan was a boy being handed a crown. But Ethan did not look like a king. He looked like a man drowning, trying to keep his mouth above water, while his wife's family stood on the dock, telling him to swim harder. Trent laughed again. Man, this is awkward, he said. Can we not do this right now? We got a shuttle coming. My gaze dropped to the pile of bags. Shuttle, airport, port. The timeline was tight. They had an end point. They just needed me to disappear long enough for whatever paperwork waited on the other side. Vanessa crossed her arms. Ethan already told you. You are not coming. We will send pictures. That is the end of it. I turned to her and I let my eyes rest on her face, long enough for her to feel it. Vanessa, I said, I paid for that cruise. You are taking it. You are taking my place. That is what this is. Her smile turned brittle. You are not entitled to a vacation just because you paid, she said. You offered. A gift is a gift, and you always act like your money buys you control. The word gift landed like bait on a hook. In my world, people love to call something a gift when they wanted it to be untouchable afterward. Ethan flinched. Dad, he said softly, please, we can talk after we get back. After we get back, the phrase carried an assumption that they would come back to the same house, the same accounts, the same safety net, and I would be waiting like a loyal dog at the door. I took a slow breath, and I looked around one last time. The scuff marks on the hardwood where suitcases had been dragged, a half-empty bottle of champagne on the counter, already opened like they were celebrating my absence, a stack of papers by the door, travel documents, and among them, the FedEx envelope with the appraisal appointment peeking out like a secret that did not know how to hide. I did not grab it, not yet. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. I stepped back toward the foyer. Ethan followed me, shoulders tight, hope flickering in his eyes, like he expected me to collapse into apology. Dad, he said, I'm sorry it happened this way. I stopped and faced him. If you were sorry, I said you would have told me to my face before today. His jaw clenched. Vanessa appeared behind him, eyes hard, ready to pounce if he showed weakness. I nodded once more to myself, then to them. "Have a safe trip," I said. "I hope only family is everything you think it will be." Loretta exhaled in relief like the air had cleared. Ray looked smug. Trent smirked and lifted his hand in a lazy little wave. Vanessa did not say thank you. She did not say goodbye. She said, "Finally good." Then she turned away like I had already left. I walked out onto the porch and down the steps. The sun was higher now, heat pressing down the kind of morning that looked normal to everyone else. My hands were steady. My heart felt like it had been put in a vice, but my mind was clean. I got in my car and drove away, not fast, not dramatic. 2 blocks down, I pulled to the curb under the shade of an oak and shut off the engine. From here, I could see their driveway through the gap between 2 houses. I could see movement figures crossing suitcases rolling the start of their departure. I sat still and watched like a man watching a storm line form over the ocean. In the bank, we called it early warning indicators. A few numbers out of place. A pattern that should not exist. A smile that did not match the eyes. I looked at my phone. It was late morning now. They would be gone soon, and then I would go back, not as a father trying to be included, but as a man verifying the parameters before the demolition. Because that FedEx envelope was not an accident. And whatever they were planning behind my back, I was done being the last person to know. I waited for the sound of their car doors, the engine, the final pull out of the driveway, and when I saw the last suitcase disappear into the trunk, I reached for my keys and made a decision that felt strangely calm. I was going back inside. Their shuttle was not loud, but the moment the tires rolled off that driveway, I felt the house exhale like it had been holding its breath for people who did not deserve it. I waited until the street went still again. No silhouettes in the windows, no last-minute running back for a forgotten charger. Then I started my car and eased around the block like I was circling a building before a fire inspection. I did not feel like a father anymore. I felt like an auditor with a bad gut feeling and a short window. The spare key warmed in my palm as I walked up the steps. My reflection in the glass of the front door looked older than I wanted to admit, silver hair, weathered face. But my eyes were clear. Vanessa could call me slow, she could call me heavy, she could call me confused. None of it changed the fact that I had spent a lifetime reading what people tried to hide behind nice words. The lock turned. The door opened. Cool air hit my face, the expensive kind you pay monthly to keep running, even when the people inside treat the place like a hotel. I stepped in and pulled the door shut behind me. Then I engaged the deadbolt out of habit. I wanted privacy too, the kind where no one walked in on me while I was looking at the bones of their plan. The house smelled like perfume and fabric softener with an undercurrent of stale champagne. In the living room, the couch cushions were still indented where Trent had lounged feet up on my table like he owned it. My jaw tightened, then I let it go. Anger was a loud tool. I needed quiet tools. I went straight to the hallway table. The FedEx envelope was still there under the stack of boarding passes and sticky notes that said things like passports and meds and chargers. They were careless. Careless people always believe the world will clean up after them. I slid the envelope out and held it at an angle so I could read the label. It was addressed to Vanessa with her married name, and the return address belonged to a local appraisal firm. The paper inside had a printed date and time for a property visit scheduled for the week after they returned. There was also a second sheet, a checklist, recent renovations updates, access to attic, access to crawl space, list of liens, if any. Liens, if any. That line sat on my tongue like a bitter pill. You do not order an appraisal for fun. You do it when you plan to borrow, refinance, sell, or shift an asset from one pocket to another. Every one of those possibilities made my stomach clench. I set the papers back exactly where I found them. I did not want the house to look disturbed, not yet. If they came back to retrieve something, or sent someone, I wanted them to think their stage was still intact. Then I moved deeper. Ethan called it his home office. I called it the room where bills went to die. I walked down the hall and pushed the door open with 2 fingers. The air in there was warm or stale with energy drinks and old takeout. Papers covered the desk. A printer sat jammed with half-fed pages. A stack of unopened envelopes leaned against a laptop like a warning sign. It was not just messy. It was the kind of messy that happens when someone is running from the truth. I closed the door behind me and stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, letting my mind do what it had always done at the bank. Find the anomaly. Find the thing that does not belong. The trash can under the desk was overflowing. I pulled it out and set it between my knees like a bucket of ore. On top were crumpled boarding pass stubs, receipts for luggage fees, and a glossy pamphlet from the cruise line. Under that were loan offers pre-approved, like bait. Under that were carbon copies of checks torn in half. I started sorting without emotion, one piece at a time, flattening paper, reading headings, noting names, noting dates. Then I found what I did not want to find. A home equity line of credit disclosure, printed on thick paper with the address of this house at the top. There was a section for borrower signatures, and there it was, my name, Walter Hayes, written in a way that looked close, but not right. Too heavy on the downstroke, too straight on the curve. The hand that signed it did not have my rhythm. My fingers went cold, not fear, not grief, something closer to disgust. I picked up a second page, a notary acknowledgement partially filled out with a blank seal space and a date penciled in. It was set up like a trap that only needed one more step to spring. I sat back in the chair and stared at my own name, forged by someone who had eaten at my table and let my grandchildren call me Grandpa. The room went quiet around me. I could hear the air conditioning hum in the hallway. I could hear my own breathing. My mind did what it always did when something crossed the line from bad to criminal. It built a timeline. Consultation fee to a law firm, transfers to Pike, an appraisal appointment, a HELOC packet with my forged signature, Vanessa saying onboard coordinator and paperwork, Ethan calling it complicated, Loretta saying I get confused, Ray talking about him being head of household, Trent lounging like a parasite. They were not just excluding me from a cruise. They were creating a narrative about me, the old man who was confused and difficult, so they could move money and property around while I looked like the problem. I did not scream. I did not punch the desk. I took out my phone and photographed the signature page, then the notary page, then the disclosure with the address and lender name. I made sure each photo was clear. Evidence is only useful when it can survive scrutiny. I kept digging. In the bottom of the trash, I found a yellow sticky note folded over itself. I opened it, and my heart gave a hard thump. It listed a bank name, a branch location downtown, and a safe deposit box number, followed by a 4-digit code that was not mine. A code, not a password for a streaming service. A code for a box in a bank vault. I stared at it until the numbers felt like they burned. Then I photographed it too. I leaned forward and pulled open the desk drawer. Inside were more papers loose unfiled, shoved like someone had tried to hide them quickly. I found a business card for a notary service. I found a printout of a calendar invite with the words Juneau meeting documents. I found a receipt for overnight delivery to a Seattle hotel addressed to someone named Vanessa Pike Hayes, marked signature required. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. They had legs to their plan, real legs, not just gossip and greed. They had scheduled steps coordinated across states timed around the cruise itinerary. This was not impulse. This was architecture. I stood up and paced the room, once slow, deliberate, letting my anger move through my body without taking control. I had seen people do reckless things in panic. Quit jobs, drain accounts, scream at family. It never ends well. The people who win are the ones who keep their head while everyone else is drowning in their own emotion. I went to the laptop. It was closed, but the charger was plugged in. Ethan was not the kind of guy who remembered to shut down properly. I opened it, and the screen lit up, asking for a password. For a moment, I just watched the blinking cursor. I felt a strange gratitude that Claire never had to see this, because she would have been torn between heartbreak and denial would have eaten her alive. I tried something simple. Ethan's birthday, wrong. Vanessa's birthday, wrong. I tried the kids' birthdays, wrong. Then I tried something that made my throat tighten, our old home address, from when Ethan was a boy, the one he claimed he hated, because the neighborhood was not fancy enough. The laptop unlocked. I stared at the desktop like it was a confession. An email client was open minimized, and I clicked it. The inbox loaded. Dozens of unread messages marketing travel confirmations, bank alerts. Then I saw a thread with a subject line that made my stomach twist: urgent funding confirmation deadline. It was from a lender I did not recognize at first. Then I realized what it was, a hard money outfit, the kind that lends fast and collects faster. The email was addressed to Ethan with Vanessa copied, and a third address that looked like Loretta's. The message was blunt. Funds would be released only upon receipt of executed documents and verification of collateral. The collateral address was this house. The guarantor name was mine. I scrolled down and my pulse kicked harder. Another line said, "Travel schedule, noted documents may be executed in Juneau as planned. However, any delay beyond 48 hours would trigger a penalty and a call-in of the note." Call-in of the note. Penalty. Those were words with teeth. I clicked another attachment in the thread and my mouth went dry. A draft guarantee form with my name typed in. A field for a signature, a field for a notary seal, a checklist that included photo identification and proof of authority. Proof of authority. That was how they planned to do it. Not just forging my signature. They planned to present paperwork that made it look like they had the right to act for me. And if they could convince a notary or a judge or a clerk, then the bank and the lender would not ask deeper questions. They would assume the old man was fine with it or too confused to fight. Vanessa's voice came back in my mind. "You always make money the point." She was right. Money was the point. It always had been. The cruise was not about family memories. It was a cover, a floating distraction, a controlled environment where they could move pieces while I was either on the ship and isolated or left behind and humiliated. And the humiliation was not an accident either. A hurt father is a quiet father. A hurt father doubts himself. A hurt father is easier to push into a narrative. I closed the email and sat down slowly. My hands shook once, just once, not from age, but from rage that threatened to boil over. I pressed my palms flat on the desk until it passed. Then I did something I had taught myself to do in every crisis. I wrote down the variables. Who benefited? Vanessa's family clearly benefited. Loretta looked too pleased, too practiced. Ray looked like he enjoyed power. Trent looked like a man who lived off other people's budgets. Ethan benefited in the short term, maybe to keep his marriage together, maybe to keep the peace, maybe because he was already in too deep. Who was the weak point? Not the money. Money is the goal, but it is not the lever. The lever is always paperwork, signatures, access deadlines. People can lie about their feelings. It is harder to lie about a notary record if you know where to look. I stood up again and moved through the room with a new kind of calm. I took photos of the Juneau calendar invite. I took photos of the notary card. I forwarded the lender emails to my own address, then I saved them offline. I did not trust anything sitting on Ethan's laptop. People get desperate, and desperate people delete. In the bottom right of the screen, a little icon flashed a shared drive folder. I clicked it. A folder labeled Family Documents. Inside were scans of passports, birth certificates, and then something that made my stomach drop. A scanned copy of my driver's license. A scanned copy of a document titled Limited Power of Attorney, the one I signed after Claire died. And next to it, a new file labeled Updated Authority Draft. Updated Authority. Draft. Those words were all I needed. I did not open it yet. Some part of me wanted to tear the whole thing apart right there, to print it, to march it into a police station to call Ethan and demand answers. But that would be emotion driving the car, and emotion crashes into ditches. I took a photo of the file list. Then I closed the laptop and left it exactly as I found it, screen down charger, plugged in like nothing had happened. I walked back into the hallway. The house felt different now, not like a home, not like a stage set, but like a crime scene waiting for the lights to turn on. In the kitchen, I noticed a clipboard on the counter under a pile of travel snacks. A list in Vanessa's handwriting, hotel check, in meet coordinator sign papers, confirm wire. Confirm wire. There it was again, money in motion. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it slowly. My throat was dry, but my mind was cold and clear. I checked the time. Late morning. They were probably already at the airport laughing too loud, acting like they were finally free. Vanessa probably believed she had won something. Ethan probably told himself he would smooth it over later like he always did when he kicked a problem down the road. They did not know what I knew. They did not know I was sitting in their house, holding the blueprint of their betrayal in my hands. A part of me wanted to drive straight to the bank downtown and demand to know what was in that safe deposit box. Another part of me wanted to go to the appraisal firm and cancel the appointment, but those were pieces. I needed the whole board. I walked back into the study and opened my folder from the safe, the one they never asked about. I ran my finger down the trustee line, my own name, clear, strong, undeniable. The trust was mine to control while I was alive and competent. And I was competent. More competent right now than I had been in months, because pain has a way of sharpening you. I put the folder back into my bag and zipped it up. My hands were steady again. There was one person I needed to call, not the police, not Ethan, not Vanessa. Someone who understood the law and the way people weaponize it against the elderly. I stepped onto the back porch for a breath of air, looking at the tidy yard, the grill Ethan barely used, the swing set I paid for, all of it built on my willingness to believe my family would not cross certain lines. They crossed them anyway. I took out my phone and scrolled to a name I had not used in years, an attorney in Charleston who had helped me structure my retirement, a man who specialized in the kind of quiet violence that comes dressed in paperwork. I hovered over the call button, then stopped. Not yet. One more step first. I needed to know what was in that bank box, and I needed to move before they could. I slid the phone back into my pocket, picked up my keys, and walked toward the front door, locking it behind me, as if I still had the right to protect what was inside. Because for now, I did. And I was about to find out just how far they meant to go. The drive downtown took less time than my thoughts did, and that was saying something because traffic on a weekday can turn a simple errand into a test of faith. I kept the radio off. I needed to hear my own breathing steady, and controlled the way I taught myself to breathe when a client tried to talk fast and confuse the facts. I parked in the garage beside the bank, the one I used to walk into 5 days a week, wearing a tie and carrying a briefcase full of policies no one read until they were in trouble. The lobby smelled the same as it always had, marble and coffee, and something faintly floral pumped through the vents to make money feel comforting. I nodded at the security guard like I belonged there because I did. Even retired, I knew the rhythm of the place. People in a hurry make mistakes. People with secrets avoid eye contact. People about to be caught suddenly become polite. At the reception desk, a young woman with a neat bun looked up and gave me a professional smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" I told her my name, Walter Hayes. I said I needed to speak with someone in safe deposit services. Her smile faltered for half a heartbeat, then returned. "Do you have an appointment?" I said no. She tapped her keyboard and her eyes moved faster than her hands. Then she looked up again. "One moment, Mr. Hayes. Please have a seat." I did not sit. I stood by the desk and watched her walk away. The little shift in her face told me something was already in the system. Maybe a note, maybe a flag, maybe a story about me that someone had planted like a landmine. A few minutes later, a man in his late 40s came out from behind the glass doors. Gray suit, careful smile name tag that read, Daniel Mercer. He had the look of a manager who had been trained to keep his voice calm no matter what disaster was happening behind the scenes. "Mr. Hayes," he said, extending his hand. "I am Daniel. Let us step into my office." His office was small and tidy, a framed photo of a fishing boat on the wall, a plant that looked too healthy to be real. He closed the door and gestured to a chair. I stayed standing for a second, then sat slowly, making him wait for me. It was a small thing, but small things mattered when someone was trying to take control of the room. Daniel folded his hands. "How can I help?" I said I need to access my safe deposit box, and I need a printout of any recent access logs, any notes, any attempted changes tied to my profile. His eyes tightened. "That is a very specific request." I gave him a look that said, "I noticed," he noticed. "It is the request," I said. He hesitated, then nodded and opened a file on his computer. "Mr. Hayes, before we proceed, I want to confirm a couple of things for your security." I said, "Go ahead." He cleared his throat. "We have a note on your account." There it was, the landmine. "A note," I repeated. Daniel spoke carefully. "It indicates that your family asked us to be cautious about certain transactions due to concerns about your well-being." My chest tightened, not because I was surprised, but because hearing it out loud made it real in a new way. They were building a paper trail. They were trying to turn me into a problem the bank needed to manage. "What concerns?" I asked. Daniel shifted his weight. "It is a general caution. It suggests we should verify identity carefully." I leaned forward. "Daniel, I used to train your staff on how to verify identity. I wrote the internal guidance on elder exploitation flags. Do not talk to me like I wandered in here from a bus stop. Tell me exactly who placed the note and what it says." His eyes widened slightly. Then he nodded like a man realizing he picked the wrong customer to condescend to. "It was placed by an authorized contact," he said. "Your son, Ethan Hayes." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, then settle into cold. Authorized contact. That phrase always sounded harmless until someone used it like a crowbar. I kept my voice even. "Remove the note." Daniel blinked. "I cannot remove it without documentation." "Then document it," I said. "I want a copy of the note, I want the timestamp, and I want the full access history on my safe deposit box." Daniel inhaled slowly. "Mr. Hayes' safe deposit access logs are limited." I held his gaze. "Not in this bank, not under these policies. You can show the access record to the owner, and if you cannot, you can bring in your security officer and we can have this conversation on the record." He stared at me for a long second, then he nodded once. All right. He stood and opened the door. I will escort you. The safe deposit corridor was colder than the rest of the bank, quiet and fluorescent, like a hallway in a hospital. A woman in gloves met us at the vault. She checked my identification, then checked it again, as if she expected my face to change, while she looked away. Daniel watched her like he wanted to say something, but did not dare. She led us to a small room with a metal table and a chair. She slid my box across the table. I froze because the box number stamped on the front was not the number on the sticky note I found in Ethan's office. This was my old box, the one Claire and I opened years ago when we started saving documents we did not want in a file cabinet at home. The sticky note in the trash listed a different box number and a code that was not mine. I turned to Daniel. There is another safe deposit box tied to my name. Daniel's eyes flickered. Mr. Hayes, I am not sure. Yes, there is, I said, and I want to see it. The vault attendant stepped back uncomfortable. Daniel swallowed. There is a box opened recently, he admitted, but it is not yours in the usual sense. I did not move. Explain that. Daniel's voice lowered. There is a box associated with a trust entity that includes your name, and it was opened with documentation that granted access to your son acting on your behalf. My hands went still. Documentation. Acting on your behalf. That was the pathway. A limited authority stretched into a full authority by people who lived on plausible language. I kept my voice low. I want to see the documentation. Daniel looked toward the attendant, then back to me. We can retrieve a copy. Do it, I said. While he stepped out, I opened my own box. Inside were the things I expected: old deeds, Claire's wedding ring box, a few letters she wrote when we were younger, and life with simpler insurance papers, my will, the last version I signed, with Claire beside me. I pulled the will out and stared at the date. It was older than I realized. Not invalid, but old enough that someone could argue it needed updating. Old enough to justify a conversation with a lawyer. Old enough to give Vanessa a reason to say we should refresh this while we are traveling. I put it back carefully. Then I slid the box shut and waited. Daniel returned with a folder. His face looked tighter now, like he had seen something he did not like. He placed the folder on the table. The documents included a power of attorney, he said. A broader one than the limited directive we have on file. I did not touch the folder at first. I just looked at it like it might bite. Where did this come from? I asked. It was submitted through our remote verification service, Daniel said. A mobile notary partner. It was uploaded with a video confirmation. Video confirmation. I felt my stomach drop, then harden. They were planning to stage me on camera. Catch me tired, distracted, maybe after a drink, maybe after an argument, and record me nodding along while someone else read the script. They could make it look clean. They could make it look voluntary. I opened the folder. The signature on the document was my name again, close but wrong. And beneath it, the notary stamp was blank with a note that said, seal, pending in-person execution, Alaska Port Juneau. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. They were going to finish it on the cruise. That was the paperwork Vanessa mentioned. That was the onboard coordinator. That was why Juneau mattered. Daniel watched my face carefully. Mr. Hayes, are you all right? I looked up at him. I am fine, but someone is trying to commit fraud using my identity. This document is not valid, and it is not mine. Daniel's jaw tightened. If that is true, we need to file an incident report. We do, I said, right now. He nodded and stepped out again, and in that moment I felt something I had not felt since Claire died. A strange loneliness, sharp and clean. The kind that comes when you realize the people you built your life around have decided you are an asset, not a person. When Daniel came back, he brought a woman in a navy blazer with a badge on her belt. Bank security. Her eyes were kind, but hard, like a nurse who has seen too many families smile while they do terrible things. Mr. Hayes, she said, I am Marla Jennings. Daniel briefed me. Can you tell me what is going on? I told her only what I could prove. I found forged documents. I saw communications about collateral and deadlines. I believe my son and his wife's family are attempting to take a loan secured by my property and my name using staged authority while I am isolated. Marla listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. We take elder exploitation seriously, she said. I almost laughed at the irony because I used to be the one saying those words to other people. Now I was the one sitting on the wrong side of the table. I want two things, I said. I want a hard hold placed on any transaction that relies on a power of attorney or remote verification. No exceptions, no phone calls, no family pressure. And I want a report number, a copy of these submissions, and the name of the notary partner involved. Marla nodded. We can do that. We will also flag your profile for high-risk fraud attempt, which means in-person verification for any change. Good, I said, and I want you to document the note Ethan placed about my well-being. Marla glanced at Daniel. He shifted uncomfortably. She typed on a tablet and read out loud in a flat voice. Customer may be experiencing cognitive decline. Family requests caution. With requests to withdraw or move assets, contact son Ethan Hayes if concerns. I felt a cold kind of anger settle into my bones. They were trying to paint me as confused. That way any protest I made would sound like proof. Marla looked up. Would you like that note removed? Yes, I said. And I want a new note added. Marla nodded. What would you like it to say? I spoke slowly so every word landed. Customer reports attempted fraud by family members. Do not contact son or daughter-in-law regarding account activity. Only contact customer directly. Any claim of incapacity must be verified by independent physician, selected by customer. Any power of attorney submitted after today is to be treated as suspicious and referred to security. Marla typed, then showed me the screen. I read it, then nodded. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. When we finished, Marla slid a business card across the table. She told me to call her directly if anyone tried to pressure the branch, if any document showed up, if any access attempt happened. Then she said something that made my stomach turn again. Mr. Hayes, she said there was an attempt to access the secondary box yesterday afternoon. I leaned forward. Who? Marla checked her notes. Your son accompanied by an older woman, likely his mother-in-law. Loretta. They tried to access it with the uploaded documents, Marla said. The notary seal was missing, so the attendant refused. They left angry. I sat back slowly. They were racing the clock. They were trying to get the box open before the cruise even started. They were desperate, which meant their timeline was tighter than I thought. What is in that box, I asked. Marla hesitated. We do not know. Safe deposit contents are private. I nodded. Then it is time I find out. She studied me. Mr. Hayes, to access that box, you need the proper key and authorization. I reached into my pocket and placed the sticky note on the table, the one with the box number and the code. I found this in my son's office, I said, and I suspect the key is not far behind. Marla's eyes sharpened. Where is the key? I looked down, and for the first time all day, I felt something like a grin trying to break through. I am going to retrieve it, I said, and then I am going to call my lawyer. The word lawyer tasted like iron, but it also tasted like relief, because this was not a family argument anymore. It was a betrayal with paperwork, and paperwork has consequences. Marla nodded, and her voice softened just a fraction. Mr. Hayes, if you feel unsafe, we can involve law enforcement. Not yet, I said. Not until I have everything documented and I know exactly who touched what. She nodded like she understood that I was not just angry, I was methodical. I left the bank with a folder of copies, a report number, and a fraud hold that would make it much harder for them to use my name like a credit card. Outside, the sunlight felt too bright, like the world had no right to look normal. In my car, I sat for a moment and stared at the steering wheel. I thought about Ethan as a boy, the way he used to run out to the driveway when I got home from work, asking what I brought him: a candy bar, a baseball card, a promise. Somewhere along the way, the candy turned into checks and the checks turned into entitlement. My phone buzzed, a notification from my email. A calendar invite had been forwarded to my address from Ethan's account either by accident or because the universe has a cruel sense of humor. The subject line said, Juno signing final authority package. Attached was a list of documents, and one of them had a name that made my throat close. Updated will and trust amendment. I sat there with the engine off the folder from the bank on the passenger seat, and I realized the cruise was never the main event. The cruise was the cover. The main event was them trying to rewrite my life while I was still alive, and if I did not move fast, they were going to come back from Alaska, not just laughing at me, but owning me. I started the car and headed back toward Mount Pleasant, because there was one place they would have hidden the key if they thought I would never look. And I was done being the last person to look. The neighborhood looked too perfect when I pulled back onto their street, the same clipped lawns, the same flags, the same quiet confidence that comes from people who believe nothing bad can happen behind white trim and freshly painted shutters. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my stomach felt like it was full of nails. I parked 2 houses down, partly from habit, partly from instinct. In my old life, You never pulled directly up to the building you were about to audit if you suspected someone might still be watching the door. I sat there for a beat, engine idling, and stared at the front windows. Nothing moved. No curtains twitched. The place looked empty, but empty was exactly what a trap liked to look like. I got out and walked up the path with the same spare key in my pocket. The hydrangeas by the porch were wilting, and I almost laughed at the small cruelty of it. Vanessa could orchestrate a whole family takeover and still forget to water the flowers. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, then turned the deadbolt again, not because I was scared of burglars, but because I needed silence. I needed time. I went straight to the kitchen. First, not the office. People hid what they thought was important in the places they felt safe, and Vanessa treated that kitchen like a command center. The counters were crowded with travel trash granola bars, portable chargers, receipts for luggage tags, and a stack of papers clipped together with a gold binder clip. I slid the top sheet forward and felt my jaw tighten. It was a checklist for the cruise, but not the kind a normal family made. It had headings like documents, signatures, backups notary, and under it, Juno slot confirmed. There was another line that made my skin go cold. Video call plan Walter calm. Walter agrees. Walter signs. Walter calm. I stared at my name written in her neat handwriting as if my mood was just another item to schedule like a dinner reservation. She was planning to manage me like a piece of luggage to keep me calm enough to nod at the right moment. I took out my phone and photographed the sheet. Evidence first, anger later. Then I moved down the hall to the master bedroom, the room they claimed like a throne. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and paused, letting myself take it in. The bed was unmade. The closet door hung open. Shoes were scattered like the aftermath of a hurricane. Vanessa had a way of leaving chaos behind her and still expecting the world to call it style. I went into the closet. There was a wall safe, bolted low behind a row of handbags, half hidden by a hanging cardigan. It was not a big safe, more like a lockbox, built into the wall, the kind people use for passports and jewelry, or the kind they use when they want quick access to keys they do not want anyone else to find. I crouched in front of it and ran my fingertips along the keypad. My mind flicked through codes like old muscle memory. Most people used birthdays, anniversaries, a house number, something sentimental that felt clever until it became obvious. I tried Ethan's birthday. The safe beeped angry. I tried Vanessa's. Same result. I tried their wedding date. Nothing. My anger rose hot and sharp, then I forced it back down. I breathed in and out slow and measured. Vanessa was not sentimental. Vanessa was tactical. She would choose a code that reminded her of control. I looked at the keypad again and tried the house number, the last 4 digits of the address. The safe clicked open like it had been waiting for me. I felt a grim kind of satisfaction, not joy, just confirmation that she was exactly who I thought she was. Inside, there were passports, a slim envelope of cash, and a small ring box. Under that, pushed flat at the bottom, was a thin pouch with 2 metal keys taped to the inside. Safe deposit keys. My mouth went dry. 2 keys meant 2 boxes, or a primary and a backup. One of them would match the number on the sticky note I had found in Ethan's office, the box they had tried to access with forged authority. The other might be the key to something I did not even know existed yet. I took both keys, photographed them in my palm, then put everything else back exactly as I found it. I closed the safe and scrambled the keypad by pressing random numbers. I left the closet looking like I had never been there. In the bedroom dresser, the top drawer was full of Vanessa's scarves and sunglasses. The second drawer was underwear and folded shirts. The third drawer was where her real life lived. I slid it open and found a neat stack of folders color-coded labeled with tabs like bank, legal, property, medical. Medical was a word that should never be treated like a weapon, and yet here it was filed like ammunition. I opened it carefully. The first page was a draft letter on the letterhead of a clinic I recognized. It was addressed to a lawyer, and it used phrases that made my throat tighten. Concerns about memory, concerns about judgment, recommend evaluation, upon return family reports, agitation, family reports, paranoia. Paranoia. If you accuse someone of paranoia, you do not have to answer their questions. You just have to point at their questions as proof. I turned the page and saw a pre-filled consent form for a cognitive assessment. My name printed at the top, a signature line empty. Then I saw another sheet clipped behind it, a script, literally a script, bullet points on how to talk to the doctor. Ethan speak first. Vanessa emphasize episodes. Loretta described incident with the cruise, used text refusal as example of agitation. My hands clenched around the paper. I had no incident. They were going to manufacture one. I took photos of every page, then I slid the folder back into place and closed the drawer slowly. I did not take the papers. Taking them would tip them off later. Photos were enough. I walked back to the hallway and stood still for a second listening. The house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a lawn service ran a blower. Life went on for the neighbors like nothing was happening, because most people never imagine the kind of betrayal that comes dressed in family vocabulary. I checked my watch. They would be at the port soon, or already through security. Every minute that passed put more distance between me and the moment they planned to corner me in Juneau with a camera and a smiling notary. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had not called in a long time, but I knew he would answer because he owed me a favor I never cashed in. Robert Klein. He was not a flashy lawyer. He was the kind of lawyer who wore the same watch for 20 years and remembered every clause he ever drafted. He had helped me set up my retirement structure after Claire passed, helped me keep my accounts clean, helped me protect my grandson's education fund from being treated like a piggy bank. I hit call. He answered on the second ring. Walter. I said, Bob, I need you to listen without interrupting. He went quiet. I told him the clean version first. The bank hold the forged power of attorney attempt, the safe deposit box tied to a trust entity, the Juneau signing plan, the appraisal appointment, the HELOC paperwork, with my forged signature. I told him about the medical script, the paranoia language, the cognitive evaluation form. When I finished, there was a short silence, the kind that means a man is choosing his words carefully because he knows the truth is heavy. Bob exhaled. They are trying to take your autonomy, he said. Not just your money, your autonomy. Yes, I said. Bob's voice sharpened. You did the right thing flagging the bank. Next, we lock down your legal authority. Today. I want you in my office within the hour. I glanced around the house. I am in Ethan's house. Bob paused. Your house, he corrected, at least in the sense that your name still carries weight. Do you have proof of the forged documents? I said I have photographs, emails forwarded, bank report number. Good, Bob said. Do not confront anyone. Do not warn them. We are going to file an emergency revocation of any prior powers of attorney and issue a new one with strict limitations. We will also draft a statement of capacity signed and witnessed, so any claim you are confused meets a wall. A wall? I like the sound of that. And Walter Bob added, if they are planning to do anything in Alaska that becomes jurisdictionally messy, I want you to stay on the ground and keep the plan here. I did not tell him yet about the keys in my pocket. I wanted to bring him the whole picture in person. I said I will be there. Bob lowered his voice. One more thing, your son placing a note with the bank about cognitive decline that is a red flag in any elder exploitation case. If we play this right, it stops being a family dispute and starts being a fraud investigation. I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. It was not satisfaction. It was grief disguised as steel. I never wanted Ethan in the same sentence as fraud investigation. But Ethan had walked into that sentence with both feet. Bob said, bring everything, and Walter, drive straight here. Do not make stops. I ended the call and stood in the hallway phone and my hand keys warm in my pocket, and I felt something settle inside me. A shift. The same shift I used to feel when a case moved from suspicion to evidence, when the story stopped being emotional and started being provable. I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the travel checklist again. Juneau slot confirmed. Video call plan. Walter calm. They thought they were directing me like a scene in a play. They thought the old man would show up smile sign and later forget what he signed. They forgot I had spent decades watching people lie with perfect posture. I moved through the house one more time, not searching now but noting. The family portrait in the hallway, Vanessa's handwriting on the calendar, Ethan's cluttered office, the way everything here carried an assumption that I would always show up to patch the cracks. I stopped at the foyer table again and looked at the appraisal paperwork. My name was not on it, but my life was in it. I photographed the lender name, the appointment time, the reference number. Then I slid it back. Before I left, I did something small, almost petty, but it mattered. I walked to the thermostat and lowered it 2 degrees. Not because I cared about the electricity bill, but because I wanted them to feel slightly uncomfortable when they came back, like the house no longer answered to them the way it used to. Then I left. I locked the door behind me and walked down the steps into the bright afternoon. My car felt too quiet when I got inside. I started the engine and pulled away, heading toward Bob's office in Charleston. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. A voicemail notification from an unknown number. I did not play it. Unknown numbers are often either salespeople or trouble, and I already had enough trouble to last me the rest of my life. But the notification came again and again, like someone was calling repeatedly, and the system was catching it. Then the caller ID changed. Ethan. My stomach flipped. For a second, some old reflex tried to rise, the father reflex, the one that wants to answer and fix the tone in his son's voice, to smooth the sharp edges and pretend the damage is not permanent. I let it ring. It stopped, then rang again. I let it ring again. I kept my eyes on the road and felt the keys in my pocket like a weight. I was not ready to speak to him. Not until I had legal paper in my hand, not until I knew exactly what was in that second box, not until I could talk as a protected man, not a cornered one. The phone stopped. A text came through. Dad, pick up. We need to talk. Need to talk. The same phrase Ethan used when he wanted something, or when Vanessa told him to make something happen. My grip tightened on the wheel. I could picture him now, maybe in the port terminal, maybe in line, maybe already on the ship's Wi-Fi. His face tight, his conscience stinging just enough to make him nervous. Or maybe he had seen something, maybe a bank notification, maybe a hold, maybe a failed access attempt, maybe the first crack. I did not respond. I drove on, and the city skyline rose ahead of me like a promise and a warning at the same time. The closer I got to Bob's office, the calmer I felt, because calm was what I needed to win. Not rage, not tears, not begging. Paper, proof, timing. When I pulled into the parking lot beside Bob's building, I cut the engine and sat there for a moment. I took the keys out of my pocket and laid them on the passenger seat. 2 small pieces of metal, nothing special to anyone else. To me, they were leverage. I grabbed my folder of photos and notes, and I stepped out of the car, feeling the heat of the pavement through my shoes. The air smelled like summer and exhaust, and the faint brine of the harbor. I walked toward the glass doors, and I felt the old part of me come back online, the part that knew how to survive when the people closest to you turned into adversaries. Inside the lobby, my phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Ethan. Please, Dad, Vanessa is freaking out. Something is wrong. I stared at the screen for a second, then slid the phone into my pocket without answering. Something was wrong, all right. And I was about to decide exactly how wrong it was going to get. Bob Klein's receptionist recognized me before I said my name, which was both comforting and depressing. In the way time does that to you, it means you built a life in a place, and it also means you are old enough to have a history people remember. She stood up. Mr. Hayes, he is ready for you right this way. Bob's office smelled like paper and wood polish, real paper, not the kind that comes out of a printer and disappears into a trash can. He was behind his desk, with his glasses on sleeves, rolled up a yellow legal pad already covered in his tight handwriting. When I walked in, he did not offer small talk. He looked at my face and read it like a document. Walter, he said, sit down. I sat, and for the first time all day, my knees felt a little weak. Not fear, just the weight of realizing I was done pretending this was a misunderstanding. Bob leaned forward. Start from the top, but only the provable parts. I nodded, then slid my phone across the desk. I opened the photo roll and started showing him the forged guarantee language, the Juno signing schedule, the travel checklist with Walter, calm written like a stage direction, the bank report number, and the copied submissions, the medical script, the consent form for an evaluation, the power of attorney draft, with my name in the wrong handwriting, and the keys, sitting heavy and quiet on his blotter like metal punctuation. Bob did not interrupt. He made a sound once low in his throat when he saw the line about paranoia. Then he clicked his pen and started writing in short bursts. When I finished, I leaned back and let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Bob took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This is not a family disagreement, he said. This is an attempted theft of identity and an attempted theft of capacity, and those are 2 different kinds of ugly. I watched him closely. What do I do? He looked at me over the top of his glasses again, and his voice went flatter, more professional, the voice of a man switching from sympathy to strategy. First, he said, we lock down authority. Today, right now, we draft a revocation of any prior power of attorney, any medical proxy, any authorization that names Ethan or anyone tied to Vanessa. We file it, we send it, we make it impossible for them to wave a paper at someone and claim they speak for you. Second, we update your estate plan, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve clarity and because old documents are soft targets for people who want to argue ambiguity. Third, we create a capacity packet, a statement signed today, witnessed, notarized by a notary I trust, and we schedule a private evaluation with a physician you choose not one, they choreograph. That way, if anyone tries to say you are confused, we have a clean baseline from before their little Juno show. I stared at him. That sounds like defense. Bob's mouth tightened. Defense first, revenge second. You do not swing back until your feet are planted. I nodded, and in my chest, I felt the smallest relief, like finding a handhold on a cliff. Bob picked up the keys again, turned them over in his palm. You said these were in their wall safe. Yes. He looked at me. That means they never intended you to have access. They intended to be the only ones with the keys while claiming the box was for your benefit. That is textbook. He set the keys down. Do you know what is in that box? No, I said. Not yet. Bob nodded slowly. Then that is next. But not alone. We are going to the bank after this and access it properly with you present, with documentation, with security aware. Whatever is in there, we inventory it and we photograph it. If there is anything that shows intent, that becomes leverage. I stared at his desk, then back at his face. What about the crews? Bob's eyebrows rose slightly. What about it? They are already on the ship, I said. At least they should be by now. Ethan said Vanessa is freaking out. Something is wrong. Bob leaned back and folded his arms. Something is wrong because you moved before they expected. You cut off their clean path. People like this rely on the old man staying in his lane, hurt, quiet, confused. When you stop behaving the way they planned, their whole timeline wobbles. Timeline. That word made my jaw tighten. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Every minute that passed took them farther out of reach, and it also took their plan closer to the moment it would become irreversible if I let it. Bob must have seen it in my face. Walter, he said, listen. The cruise is a distraction. Let them float. They cannot sign anything on your behalf. If we revoke authority today and notify the proper institutions, they can scream into the ocean all they want. I held his gaze. Then what do I do with them? Bob's expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. You do what you have always done. You impose consequences. But you do it legally, and you do it in a way that leaves a paper trail so clean it squeaks. He slid his legal pad toward me and tapped a list he had already started. We know they tried to leverage your name, he said. We know they planned to secure funding against your property. We know they scheduled an appraisal. We know there is a secondary safe deposit box tied to a trust entity, and they tried to access it. We also know you are still tied to that house. In some way you said you were still on the deed. Yes, I said. I kept majority interest because I never finalized the transfer after Claire died. Ethan always said we would do it later. Bob nodded once. Then later just became your best friend. A cold shiver ran through me, not from fear, from recognition. The lever had been there the whole time. Bob continued. We do not need to take the house today, but we do need to stop them from using it as collateral or claiming it as theirs free and clear. I want a title search, and I want it by the end of the day. If your ownership stake is what you think it is, we can file a notice that puts the world on alert that no one can quietly refinance or encumber that property without your consent. I swallowed. And if I want them out? Bob's voice softened slightly. Then we do it the right way. We plan it. We do not act from anger. Anger is how people like Vanessa set traps. You act from position. I nodded, but my hands curled into fists under the desk. In my mind, I could still hear her voice, calling me heavy, like my existence was an inconvenience. I could still see Ethan's eyes sliding away from mine. Bob watched me for a moment. You still love your son? He said quietly. I did not answer right away. The truth was complicated. I loved the child I raised. I did not recognize the man who let his wife write a script about my calmness so she could steal my autonomy. I said I love who he was. I do not know who he is. Bob nodded like he understood. That is grief. Do not let grief make choices for you. He stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a file folder, stamped with his firm name. He placed it on the desk and opened it. All right, he said. Let us work. For the next hour, the room filled with the sound of paper sliding pen, scratching the dull clack of a notary seal. From the notary, Bob called in from the hall, a woman with steady hands and a face that did not invite games. Bob read each document out loud in plain language, and I signed not as a man being managed, but as a man taking the steering wheel back. Revocation of power of attorney. New limited directive naming Bob as temporary agent for legal matters, strictly limited to protective actions. Medical directive naming my old friend Hank as my healthcare proxy, because Hank would sooner punch a man than let him sign away my rights in a hallway. Instructions to my bank and investment firm that no third-party instruction would be accepted without in-person verification by me. A signed statement of capacity witnessed and notarized, dated today. Bob handed me each page after I signed. "Keep these in your possession," he said. "Do not leave them in a car. Do not email them to Ethan. The first time he sees them should be after they have already been served on the institutions." Served. That word felt heavy, but it also felt clean. When we finished, Bob picked up his phone and made 3 calls in a row, efficient, blunt. He spoke to my investment firm, to the bank's security contact, Marla, and to the county title office. Each time he used the same language: client reports attempted, fraud client is present, client revokes all authority, client requests, documentation and flags. When he hung up, he looked at me. "Now we go to the bank." I stood up and my legs felt steadier now. Not because the problem was gone, but because I had structure around me. Structure is what keeps a building standing in a storm. As we walked out, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. 3 missed calls, 2 new texts. "Dad, please answer. Vanessa is losing it. The ship is saying something about payment. I do not understand what is happening." Payment. I felt my stomach tighten again. I had not touched the cruise payments yet. Not directly. Which meant something else had triggered, maybe the lender panic, maybe the bank hold, maybe the attempt to access the box being denied, maybe the house collateral not clearing. If Vanessa was losing it, it meant her confidence was cracking, and confidence is always the first thing to go when a con artist realizes the mark is awake. Bob glanced at my screen without asking. "Do not answer," he said. "Not yet." We rode the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, the air felt too cold, and outside, the sun felt too bright. Bob walked beside me to my car, not like a bodyguard, but like a man who understood that sometimes families become the most dangerous strangers. At the bank, Daniel Mercer met us at the entrance like he had been waiting. His smile was strained, polite, nervous. "Mr. Hayes," he said. "Mr. Klein." Bob shook his hand, then spoke with a calm authority that made Daniel's shoulders drop a fraction. "Daniel, we are here to access the box associated with the trust entity that includes Mr. Hayes' name. Mr. Hayes is present. We have documentation. We are also formally requesting copies of all submissions tied to that box and the identity verification steps used." Daniel nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, of course." Marla, the security officer, appeared again, this time with a thin folder in her hand. She greeted me with a small nod that felt like respect. We went back to the vault corridor, colder than the rest of the building, and into the small room with the metal table. The vault attendant brought the box, and when she set it down, I saw the number stamped on the front matched the sticky note. The same number they planned to access without me. My hand hovered over the key. It felt absurd that so much harm could be hidden behind something so small. Marla stood near the door. Daniel stood to the side, hands clasped, eyes flicking between me and Bob like he was watching a live wire. I inserted the key and turned it. The lock gave with a soft click. The lid lifted. Inside were documents stacked neatly, too neatly, like someone had been curating a version of my life. There were copies of my will, a newer version than the one in my personal box. There were drafts of a trust amendment with sections highlighted. There was a folder labeled Walter Hayes Medical History, and that made my stomach churn. There was also an envelope with a return address from an appraisal firm, the same one from the kitchen table, and inside it was a preliminary valuation that suggested the house could support a large line of credit. Then I saw the last thing, a slim leather folder, black, expensive, with the logo of a private lender on the corner. Bob's hand went still on the edge of the table. Marla leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. I opened the leather folder, and the first page inside had a bold heading that made the room feel smaller. Personal Guarantee Agreement, Walter Hayes. Below it, the signature line was blank, but the document was otherwise complete and clipped. Behind it was a schedule of disbursements. Disbursement 1 paid at signing to Pike Family Holdings. Pike. Vanessa's maiden name. My throat tightened. It was not just my son and his wife. It was her family business, a machine set up to use me as fuel. I looked up, and my voice came out low and rough. They were going to borrow against my name, pay her people, then declare me confused and lock me down before I could object. Bob nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel swallowed hard. Mr. Hayes, we did not know the contents. Marla's voice was calm but cold. Now you do. I sat back in the chair, and for a moment, I felt the old hurt rising, the personal betrayal, the family drama of it. My son, my grandchildren, my home all turned into collateral and scripts. Then the hurt sharpened into something else, something cleaner. Clarity. I looked at Bob. What is the next move? He stared at the paperwork like he was already drafting the next step in his head. We copy everything he said. We secure the originals. Then we decide how public you want to make this. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, relentless like a heartbeat that would not let me rest. Ethan calling, Vanessa calling, Loretta calling. They were out at sea, or close to it, and they were panicking because their plan was slipping out of their hands. I looked down at the black leather folder again, at my name typed like I was a tool. I did not feel old in that moment. I felt awake. And I knew exactly what kind of privacy they were about to get. In that little vault room with the cold air and the metal table, and my name printed like a tool on a guarantee agreement, the hurt finally stopped pretending it was just hurt. It turned into a plan. Bob did not rush me. He watched my face the way he watched documents, looking for the part that would tear under pressure. "You have enough here to make this ugly for them," he said quietly. "The question is, how fast you want the tables turned." "Fast," I said. "Not reckless, just fast." Marla stood near the door, arms folded, the bank security badge on her belt, catching the fluorescent light. Daniel Mercer looked like he had swallowed a stone. The vault attendant kept her eyes on the floor, like none of this was her business, which was fair. None of this should have been anyone's business, except mine. Bob slid a legal pad across the table, already dividing it into sections with his pen. Bank title lender, cruise medical law enforcement. He wrote like a man laying out a battlefield, not for revenge as a feeling, but for revenge as a sequence of steps. We copy everything he said. We seal this box, and we put the originals in your possession. Then we make calls while they are still on the water and still thinking you are home sulking. I looked down at the disbursement schedule again. Pike Family Holdings. It made the family drama suddenly bigger than my living room. It was not only betrayal, it was a family business, a system, a pipeline. My son was one link in it, and Vanessa's parents were another, and somewhere behind them were people who made money by turning old men into signatures. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket again. Another call, another text. I did not check the names. I already knew. Bob watched me reach for it, then shook his head once. Not yet. Marla stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, I can make a formal referral for suspected elder financial exploitation. That triggers an internal process, and it also protects you if anyone tries to claim you are confused for reporting this." I nodded. "Do it." Daniel cleared his throat, his voice careful. "Mr. Hayes, I want to apologize. We should have escalated when your son placed that note about your cognitive decline. You should have asked me," I said. "That is what you should have done. If anyone says a customer is declining, you look the customer in the eye. You do not take a family member's word as gospel." Daniel's face flushed. "Yes, sir." Bob closed the leather folder and tapped it twice, like sealing a lid. "Daniel, you are going to print out every submission related to this trust box, including who uploaded it and what device it came from. Marla, you are going to log this as suspected fraud. Walter, you are going to walk out of here with copies, and you are going to keep them somewhere your son cannot reach." We did it in that order. Marla typed and printed. Daniel made calls to a back office team and returned with a stack of pages, timestamps, IP addresses, a remote notary partner name, and a recorded verification checklist that looked clean on the surface and rotten underneath. When the last sheet slid into my folder, Marla gave me a report number again, and this time it felt like a shield. Outside the vault corridor, the bank lobby felt too warm, too normal. People stood in line with deposit slips and coffee breath, smiling into their phones, complaining about parking. I wanted to grab a random man by the shoulders and tell him to cherish his ordinary problems because some of us were being measured for cages. Bob walked beside me like he could sense the anger trying to sprint ahead of the plan. We got into my car and I set the folder between us like it was fragile. Bob pulled out his own phone and started dialing before I even turned the key. First call was to the private lender listed on the guarantee packet. A woman answered with a polished voice that sounded like she had never been told no. "This is Robert Klein, attorney for Walter Hayes," he said. "I am calling to notify you that any personal guarantee agreement bearing Mr. Hayes' name is unauthorized. We have documentation of attempted fraud. You will freeze any pending disbursement immediately, and you will preserve all records. If you release funds, you will be knowingly participating in fraud." There was a pause. Her voice sharpened. "Mr. Klein, our process includes identity verification." Bob's voice stayed calm. Your process includes an unsigned guarantee and a missing notary seal. Your process includes a disbursement schedule to Pike Family Holdings. Your process includes a borrower with no legitimate authority. Freeze it. The woman tried to push back, but Bob did not let her. He gave her the report number. He gave her Marla's contact. He demanded an email confirmation in writing. When he ended the call, his face stayed neutral, but I saw a flicker of satisfaction. That stops their money pipeline, he said. I swallowed. What about the appraisal? Next. He called the appraisal firm, the one listed on the paperwork from Vanessa's kitchen. He used the same language: unauthorized, suspected fraud, do not enter the property, do not provide a report to anyone except my office. He gave them the county recorder number we were about to obtain and told them their license depended on not being part of an elder exploitation scheme. Then Bob called the county title office again, pushed for a rush search, and set an appointment in the morning to file a notice that would make any refinance or lien feel like stepping into wet cement. I stared out the windshield at the bank parking lot. Cars came and went. Life moved like it always had. Meanwhile, my son and his wife were out there in some floating hotel, still thinking they were the smartest people in the room. My phone buzzed again. I looked this time. Ethan, Vanessa, Loretta. Then a new number I did not recognize. Bob saw it and raised an eyebrow. That is not them. No, I said. It is new. Answer it, Bob said. Put it on speaker. I hesitated. Every instinct in me wanted to ignore everything that was not part of the plan. But then I remembered something about predators. They do not like uncertainty. They like to move fast. They like to talk you into compliance before you have time to breathe. I answered. A man spoke, his voice, clipped, impatient, but polite enough to pass for professional. Mr. Hayes, this is Grant Pruitt. I represent Pike Family Holdings. I felt Bob's gaze sharpen. Pike. The name landed like a weight. Yes, I said. What do you want? Mr. Pruitt exhaled, as if I were the inconvenience in his day. There appears to be confusion regarding a financing arrangement. My client indicates your family authorized a personal guarantee to support a bridge loan tied to property valuation. Bob leaned closer, his mouth a thin line. I kept my voice flat. My family did not authorize anything, and I did not authorize anything. Mr. Pruitt paused, then tried again, softer. Mr. Hayes, I understand there may be stress, but this is simply a matter of paperwork. The crews can do that to families. Tempers, miscommunications. We just need to confirm a few things so everyone can enjoy their vacation. There it was. The manipulation. The attempt to make it sound small and social, not criminal. The attempt to turn a fraud into a misunderstanding. Bob spoke, his voice sharp but controlled. Grant, this is Robert Klein, Mr. Hayes' attorney. You are now on notice that any attempt to use Mr. Hayes' name or assets without his express authorization is fraud. We have filed a report. We have notified the lender. We have bank security involvement. If your client contacts Mr. Hayes again, we will add harassment to the stack. The man's tone chilled. Mr. Klein Pike Family Holdings is a legitimate business. Bob did not flinch. Then Pike Family Holdings should be very interested in not being tied to elder exploitation. We will be preserving this call record and forwarding it to the appropriate investigators. The line went silent for a beat. Then the man said, almost too calmly, Mr. Hayes, perhaps you should consider your family's long-term welfare before making threats. I felt something cold slide through me. That was not a legal remark. That was a pressure tactic. It sounded like a warning dressed up in civility. I leaned forward, my voice low. My family's long-term welfare would improve dramatically if they stopped trying to steal from me. Then I ended the call. The car felt quieter after that, like even the air needed a moment. Bob looked at me. That was useful. Useful, I repeated. Yes, he said. It confirms Pike is actively coordinating not just Vanessa's parents. This is bigger. It also tells us they are already scrambling. My phone buzzed again. Ethan, another text, longer this time. Dad, please. I swear I did not know it would go this far. Vanessa says it is just paperwork, and her mom has a lawyer. The ship staff is asking for a card. Now they say our suite is not settled. Please answer. I am scared. Scared. I stared at the word, and for a second, I felt the old instinct to protect him. Then I remembered the script in Vanessa's folder, Walter Calm, and I remembered the note at the bank cognitive decline contact son, and I remembered that my son let his wife plan my life like a project. Bob watched my face change. He spoke gently but firm. Walter, Whatever you feel right now, do not let it make you sloppy. He is baiting you, even if he does not realize he is baiting you. I nodded, and I hated that it was true. What about the cruise, I asked. The payments. Bob leaned back. You paid for the booking. You can remove your card from the file and dispute any charges made under false pretenses. You can also notify the cruise line that you are not traveling and that any attempt by others to represent you is unauthorized. That alone will force them to provide their own payment method. I swallowed. If I do that, they will know. Bob's eyes stayed steady. They already know something is wrong. Vanessa is panicking. Ethan is texting. Pike's lawyer called you. The secret is out, Walter. The only question is whether you control the narrative or they do. Control the narrative. I had spent decades telling clients that the first story that hits paper is the one that sticks. If you let someone else write the first version of you, you spend the rest of your life trying to erase it. I took a breath. Do it. Bob nodded and dialed the cruise line's fraud and billing department. He spoke like a man who had done this before, calm, precise, no emotion, just facts and pressure. He gave them the report number. He requested immediate removal of my payment method from any onboard account. He asked for a written confirmation. He asked for the name and badge number of the person handling the case. I listened and imagined Ethan in linen shorts, Vanessa with her tight smile, Loretta complaining about the cabin, all of them thinking they had already won. I imagined the first time someone on that ship asked for a card and their confidence cracked. When Bob ended the call, he looked at me. That part is done. Now you need to decide your next move at home. Home. That word felt strange, because home was the place they tried to turn into collateral. I stared out at the road again. If I go back to that house, I said I can lock myself into another round of searching, another round of finding new hidden truth. I can get lost in it. Bob nodded. Which is why you do not go alone. Also, you do not go to confront. You go to document, then you leave. I nodded slowly. Bob continued. There is another piece here, Walter. The will in that box. You said your personal will is older. The one in the trust box is newer. My throat tightened again. Yes. That is not nothing, Bob said. If they had you sign an amendment in Alaska, they could claim it updated the will and excluded anyone they wanted. They could cut out your sister, your daughter, anyone who stands in their way, and then call it your wishes. That is the kind of inheritance betrayal that families never recover from. My sister. I had not thought of Marlene yet, not today. She lived 2 counties away, stubborn as a fence post, the only person left who still spoke to me like I was not fragile. If Vanessa got her hands into my will, she would not just take money. She would take the last thread of family that felt real. Bob looked at me. Who do you trust besides me? I answered without thinking. Marlene and Hank. Then call them, Bob said. Bring them in. Make it public within your circle. Toxic families thrive in silence. Break the silence. I took my phone, and for the first time in hours, I used it for something that did not feel like fire. I called Marlene. She answered on the first ring, brisk and suspicious. Walter, what happened? I said I need you to come to Charleston tonight. Something is happening, and I need you as a witness. There was a pause, then her voice softened. Are you safe? I looked at Bob, then out the windshield. Yes, I said. I am safe, but I am not safe from paper, and I need you here before they turn paper into a cage. Marlene did not ask for details over the phone. She just said, I'm leaving in 20 minutes. When I hung up, I felt a small piece of the loneliness crack. Not vanish, just crack. Bob checked his watch. All right, we have time for one more controlled move before evening. I looked at him. Which is, he held up the keys again, the cold metal catching the light. We go back to that house, we retrieve anything else that proves intent, and we leave. Then tonight we prepare the next strike. Title notice. Estate update. And if your ownership stake is still controlling, we consider whether you want to keep being tied to that property or whether you want to cut the cord in a way that makes them feel what it is like to be excluded. Excluded. The word hit me like a bitter prayer. They excluded me from the cruise with a text. They tried to exclude me from my own life with a medical script. Maybe it was time I excluded them from the only thing they truly cared about access. I started the car. The folder of documents sat between us like a loaded weapon, not violent, just heavy with consequence. As we pulled out of the lot, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan Shorter, now frantic. Dad, the purser says we have until dinner to put a card on file, please, please. I did not answer, not because I did not feel anything. I felt plenty. I felt grief. I felt rage. I felt the old father instinct twisting in my chest like wire. But above all, I felt something steadier, something that had been missing for years. Self-respect. We turned onto the highway toward Mount Pleasant, and the sky ahead looked too bright, too wide, like the world was daring me to either collapse or stand up straight. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept driving, because the next evidence was still sitting in their house, and I wanted it in my hands before the sun went down. The highway rolled under my tires like a long strip of dull gray tape, and the farther we drove from the bank, the less I heard the air conditioner, and the more I heard my own thoughts clicking into place one after another, as if my mind was tightening bolts on a machine that had been rattling for years. Bob sat in the passenger seat with my folder on his lap, one hand resting on it like he was keeping it from sliding, or maybe keeping me from doing something stupid. He watched the road, watched the mirrors, watched my hands, and he said very little, which I appreciated. When a man is trying to keep his dignity from bleeding out, he does not need a sermon. He needs space and a plan. Mount Pleasant looked the same as it always had, breezy, bright, expensive, full of people who believed money was the same thing as safety. The houses got bigger as we turned into Ethan's subdivision, and the streets got quieter like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. I did not park in the driveway. I parked down the street again, half habit, half strategy. Bob raised an eyebrow. "You are consistent," he said. "I am careful," I said. We walked up together, the folder tucked under my arm, my key in my pocket. The sun was lower now, and the light made the white trim on the house look almost golden. It was beautiful in the way a nice suit is beautiful, impressive at a glance, meaningless if the person wearing it has rot underneath. When I unlocked the door, it opened easily. No new lock, no fresh key code. That told me something. Vanessa did not think I would come back. She thought the text message was enough. She thought the old man would be at home staring at a suitcase and feeling sorry for himself. Bob stepped inside behind me and closed the door, then turned the deadbolt with a deliberate click. "We do not touch anything without photographing it first," he said. I nodded and pulled out my phone. We moved through the foyer slowly like we were entering a place that had teeth. The air still smelled faintly of Vanessa's perfume, and Ethan's cologne mixed with something sharper like new leather and money and entitlement. The first thing I noticed was the wall where the family photos hung. There were 3 frames, Ethan and Vanessa at their wedding, Ethan holding our grandson, and one of Claire smiling in the backyard before her sickness took her voice. That one had been turned slightly toward the wall, not fully hidden, just angled enough to make it look like an accident. I stared at it for a beat. Bob noticed. He did not comment. He just let me feel it. We went straight to the kitchen. The travel pile was still there. The checklist with Walter Calm was still on the counter, clipped and smug. I photographed it again with Bob standing beside it so the scale was obvious. Then I slid it into a clear evidence sleeve Bob handed me from his briefcase. "You brought those?" I said. Bob shrugged. "I do not like surprises." I moved to the drawer where Vanessa kept pens and sticky notes. I opened it and froze. There was a small black case inside the kind you might use for earbuds, but it was not earbuds. It was a compact digital recorder, and beside it were 2 spare memory cards. My stomach tightened. I picked it up slowly like it might bite. I looked at Bob. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "That is not for grocery lists." "No," I said. I turned it over and saw a strip of painter's tape on the back with writing in Vanessa's tidy hand. "Juno Walter, confirm." Juno again. The same place. The same timeline. They were going to record me. They were going to get my voice on file, maybe make me sound confused, maybe make me sound angry, maybe cut it up and present it to a judge like proof. Bob held out a glove from his pocket. "Put that on." I slid the glove over my hand and opened the case. The recorder powered on with a soft beep. It had dates, it had folders. My throat went tight when I saw one labeled with my name. Bob's voice dropped. "Do not play anything here. If it auto-syncs or uploads, we do not know. Photograph the screen, then power it off and bag it." I did exactly that, hands, steady, heart, loud. I photographed the folder list, the date stamps, the storage size. Then I powered it off and sealed it in a bag. We moved to the hall closet, next to the one Vanessa used like a filing cabinet. Inside were folders, emergency supplies, spare keys, and a clipboard with household service schedules. The top of the clipboard had a note that made my blood run cold. "If Walter shows up, keep him talking, record call. Mom." Under that, a phone number. Not Ethan's, not Vanessa's. It was Loretta's. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then I took a photo. The betrayal was not only in the big moves, the loans, the papers, The box. It was in the small, casual cruelty, the assumption that my presence was an incident to manage. Bob touched my elbow lightly. Keep going. We went into Ethan's office, and I felt my jaw tighten as soon as I stepped inside. The room was the same mess I remembered, but mess can hide patterns if you learn how to see. He had 2 monitors, a nice chair, a printer, and a shredder that looked untouched. The trash can was half full. I did not dig through it first. I looked at the desk surface. 2 coffee rings, a notepad with scribbles, a sticky note with the word escrow and a number that looked like a loan amount, another sticky note with a name Adrian Wells. I did not recognize it, but I did not forget it. Then I saw the printer tray. There was a single page still sitting there face down as if someone had printed it and then gotten distracted by the rush to the port. I lifted it slowly. It was a draft email from Vanessa to Adrian Wells, subject line capacity plan. The body was short and it made my skin crawl. Adrian, we need a physician willing to document decline. Based on family report, no deep testing. We need speed. We will have video and audio. Walter will be agitated about the cruise. Easy to frame. We can pay cash. Discretion required. Bob stared at the page and something in his face hardened. That is not just manipulation, he said. That is a bribery attempt. I took photos and bagged the page. Then I checked the printer history menu because that is what you do when you have spent a lifetime hunting paper trails. The last jobs listed matched what we had already seen: medical script consent form, trust amendment draft. But there was one more title that made my throat tighten. Life insurance change request. I looked at Bob. He nodded once. We are pulling that too. We went to the master bedroom, and I hated how natural it felt to walk into it like I still belonged there, like I was still the man who had paid for half the things in this house. The closet safe was still behind the handbags. The code still worked. I opened it with the same 4 digits and pulled out the contents again, careful, methodical. The passports, the cash, the keys we already had. But now I looked deeper. Behind the ring box, taped to the back wall of the safe, was a thin manila envelope. Vanessa had hidden it the way people hide something they do not want found, not by locking it away, but by putting it in a place where it blends with other secrets. I pulled it out. Inside was a stack of forms, and on the top was a beneficiary designation. My name as the insured, a policy number I did not recognize, a coverage amount that made my stomach drop. $2 million. Primary beneficiary Vanessa Pike Hayes. Secondary beneficiary Ethan Hayes, trustee. I felt the room tilt. Bob took the page, carefully gloved eyes, scanning. When was this submitted? I flipped to the date, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, right around the time the cruise was booked. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my legs suddenly did not want to hold me. They were not just stealing my money, I said quietly. They were building a payoff for my death. Bob did not soften it for me. They were building options, he said. If they got guardianship, they got your assets. If that failed and you died soon enough, they got a lump sum anyway. Either way, you lose control. My mouth went dry. Claire would have seen it. She would have seen the greed in Vanessa's eyes the way she saw everything I pretended not to notice. And she would have hated herself for not stopping it sooner. I forced myself to stand. What else? Bob looked around the bedroom like he could smell more lies. Checked the nightstand. I opened the drawer, a lipstick, a charger, a bracelet, and a small notebook with a flower on the cover. Vanessa's handwriting again. It was not a diary. It was a ledger. Amounts, dates, and names. One name repeated Pike Family Holdings. Another name repeated Adrian Wells. Another repeated Halifax Escrow. And beside some entries were short phrases. Court fees, retainer evaluator, notary travel, Alaska contingency. I swallowed hard. Bob leaned in, eyes tight. Photograph every page. I did. My phone camera clicked over and over, and with each click, the picture became clearer. This was not a spur-of-the-moment family fight. This was a planned takeover, a family business plan dressed up as concern for an old man's health. When we left the bedroom, my phone buzzed again. I checked it without thinking. Ethan, a voice message, now not text. The kind that means panic, has moved past pride. Bob saw my face change. Do not play it here, he said. I nodded and slipped the phone away. We went to the garage next. The space smelled like rubber and lawn fertilizer and the faint metallic tang of tools. I had built half the shelving with my own hands. Ethan used it like storage for toys and sports gear. On the workbench, there was a small plastic bag with a notary stamp kit inside, the kind you can buy online if you know what to search for. Bob's jaw tightened. "That is the kind of thing that should never be in a family garage," he said. I picked up the bag, gloved, and turned it over. It had a company label, Quick Seal Notary Services. Vanessa's handwriting again on a sticky note attached to it. "Bring to Juno, do not forget." I felt something inside me go cold, almost calm. So that was it, I said. They were going to have their own notary, their own doctor, their own script. They were going to manufacture my incompetence like a product. Bob nodded. "And you were supposed to be grateful." We gathered everything we could without turning the house into a tornado. Photos, bagged documents, the recorder, the notary kit, the ledger notebook. Bob made a note of where everything came from, timestamps, room drawer location. He did not miss a detail. He moved like a man who had watched too many families destroy each other and still wanted the law to land cleanly. As we headed back through the kitchen, I paused at the counter and looked at the checklist one more time, the line about Walter Calm. I heard Vanessa's voice in my head, too sharp, too sure. Old men get confused. Old men get emotional. Old men do not notice paperwork. I leaned down and turned the paper over. On the back, faint indentations from writing on top of it, like a ghost of what she had written before. I held it up to the light. There was an outline of words, barely visible, but I could make them out. After Juno, list house, pay pike, relocate, Walter placed. Placed. Like I was a chair. I stood up slowly. I looked at Bob. He nodded once. "Photograph it." I did. Then, as we walked toward the front door, we heard the sound of tires on gravel. A car pulled into the driveway. My body went rigid. Bob's hand came up slightly, a silent signal to stop. Through the sidelight window, I saw a man in a polo shirt step out with a clipboard. The appraiser. He was early, or he was not the appraiser at all. Bob leaned close, voice low. "We do not open the door." The man walked up and rang the bell. Once, then twice. Then he tried the handle like he had done it before. My heart thudded. I held my breath and waited for the deadbolt to hold. It held. The man stepped back, glanced at the house, then at his clipboard, then pulled out his phone. He spoke into it, but I could not hear him through the door. Bob took out his phone and texted Marla, the bank security officer, with the appraisal firm name and the time. Then he texted the appraisal firm directly, the same one we had warned, asking them to confirm if they had someone on site. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a different number. Marlene. She had made it to Charleston faster than I expected. I did not answer. Not yet. Not with the man outside. The man on the porch waited another minute, then turned and walked back to his car. He did not look annoyed. He looked like someone who expected this, who knew the schedule had changed. He drove away slowly. I exhaled, and my lungs felt like they had been clenched for an hour. Bob looked at me, his voice steady. That was either a legitimate appraiser with bad timing or a scout. "A scout," I repeated. Bob nodded. "They are not just panicking on the ship. They are moving pieces on land, which means our next move needs to happen tonight." I felt the folder under my arm, heavy with proof, heavy with hidden truth, heavy with the kind of evidence that turns family drama into a courtroom. I locked the front door again, then checked the street. No other cars lingering, no neighbors watching, at least not obviously, but my skin still felt like it was listening. We got back into my car. The sun was almost down, and the sky had that bruised color it gets when a storm is building offshore. Bob looked at me. "We go to my office. We secure these items. Then we call Marlene and Hank in. And Walter, we make one decision tonight, about the house." I stared out at Ethan's driveway, the house sitting there like a lie. My phone buzzed again. Ethan's voice message, still waiting. Vanessa's missed calls stacked like a pile of debt. I felt my jaw tighten, and I knew the next phase was no longer about preventing them from taking my life. It was about taking my power back in a way they could not undo. I started the engine, and as I pulled away from the curb, I did not look back at the house like it was a home. I looked at it like it was an asset, and I told myself one simple truth. They wanted only family, so I was about to show them what it felt like to come back and find themselves excluded. The engine hummed steady, and the folder on the passenger seat felt heavier than any toolbox I had ever carried. Proof has weight, not because paper is heavy, but because truth changes what you can afford to pretend. Bob's office lights were still on when we pulled into his lot, and that alone told me he had already committed to this fight like it was personal. He met us at the door with his sleeves rolled up and a travel mug in his hand, and the first thing he did was look around the parking lot like he expected someone to be watching. Inside, he locked the door behind us, then walked straight to the conference table and opened a clean stack of evidence sleeves. He moved with the calm of a man who had seen family drama turn into felony charges more than once. "Lay it out," he said, "not everything at once in order." We did. The recorder, the notary kit, the ledger, the capacity plan email, the insurance change request, the kitchen checklist with Walter, the clipboard instruction to keep me talking and call Loretta. Bob photographed each item again under his office lights. Then he wrote notes on a legal pad, time, location, chain of custody, who touched what and when. He looked up at me. "Now you call Hank and Marlene and put them on speaker." My phone buzzed as if it had been waiting for permission to make noise. More missed calls, more texts. Ethan's name stacked like a pile of unpaid bills. I called Marlene first. She answered breathless car noise behind her. "I am 5 minutes out," she said. "What is going on, Walter?" I kept my voice steady. "Come to Bob's office. Bring your spine." She snorted once, and I heard her turn signal click. "I always do." Then I called Hank. He answered on the second ring, gravel in his voice, the kind of voice you get after a lifetime of saying what you mean and not caring who winces. "Walter," he said, "you okay?" I looked at the evidence on the table. "I am upright. I am not okay. I need you here as my medical proxy and as a witness." Hank did not ask questions either. He just said, "I'm on my way." Bob nodded satisfied, and then he slid a folder toward me that he had already prepared my revocations, my capacity statement, my new directive naming Hank, all signed and notarized earlier. He tapped it with his pen. "Now we move to the real decision," he said. "The house." I stared at the table for a long moment. That house had been my last big act of love, the thing Claire and I believed would be stability for Ethan, a roof that would not wobble. Stability is a beautiful gift, until the wrong people decide it is leverage. Bob watched my face. "You said you still hold controlling interest on title." "Yes, I never finished the transfer." "Then you have options," he said. "You can file a protective notice and stop refinancing. You can file for partition and force sale, or you can transfer your interest into an entity that changes the rules overnight." I swallowed. What kind of entity? Bob did not smile, but his eyes sharpened. "An irrevocable trust with you as the beneficiary during your lifetime, and with conditions that require any occupant to have a written license from the trustee. No license, no right to stay. The trustee can terminate the license with notice. The trustee can also decide what happens if you are declared incompetent, which will not happen now, because we are building your capacity packet." My mouth went dry. "That would mean Ethan cannot claim it as his." "Correct," Bob said. "He can live there only by permission, and permission can be revoked." The word revoked sat in my chest like a stone that finally fit the shape of the hole. I asked, and the moment I did, I knew I was past the point of turning back. "How fast?" Bob leaned forward. "If you are ready tonight, we can execute the deed transfer and record it first thing in the morning. We can also draft the occupancy termination notice tonight, served electronically, and post it on the door. When they come back from the cruise, they will find the rules changed, and they will find they are excluded from the one thing they thought was guaranteed." Excluded. That was the word Ethan used in that text, as if I were an accessory. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Ethan. I did not open it. I did not need to. I already knew the tone panic, coded in apology, coded in self-preservation. Bob said one more thing. "The insurance change request. We notify the carrier tonight. We freeze the beneficiary designation. We file a fraud alert with supporting evidence. If Vanessa's family thought they could build a payoff for your death, we cut that off and leave a record that makes it hard for them to touch any policy in your name again." I nodded slowly. Every piece of their plan had an answer, and the answers were already forming into something more than defense. Then the door buzzer sounded sharp and fast. Bob checked the camera feed on his phone, then walked to the door and opened it. Marlene came in like a storm in a leather jacket, hair windblown, eyes already narrowed. She looked at the evidence on the table and made a sound in the back of her throat, disgusted and angry. "Lord have mercy," she said. "They were really going to do this." I stood and hugged her quickly, and I hated that my hands shook a little. Not weakness, just the release of not being alone in the room anymore. Bob introduced them, then went straight to the point. "Marlene, I need you as a witness and as a family voice who can testify about Walter's capacity and his relationship with his son. Hank is coming to be medical proxy and witness." Marlene sat, leaned forward, and looked at me like she was checking my pupils. "You sound like yourself," she said. "You look tired, but you are not lost. Tell me the truth. Did you ever sign anything for Vanessa?" "No," I said. "Never." Then she slapped the table lightly with her palm. "All right. Then we stop treating them like confused children and start treating them like what they are: predators. The word predators made me flinch, then settle. It was harsh, but it fit. A few minutes later, Hank arrived. He was a big man, retired firefighter shoulders that still filled a doorway. He walked in, saw the evidence, and his jaw tightened so hard I could hear his teeth shift. He looked at me. "Walter, you want me to be your medical proxy?" "Yes." He nodded once. "Done." Bob handed Hank the directive, explained it in plain language, then had Hank sign acceptance. Hank did it without drama, like it was a promise, not paperwork. Then Bob stood at the head of the table, like a man about to draw a line through the middle of the earth. "Here is what we do," he said. "Tonight we finalize the trust and the deed. Tomorrow morning we record it. We notify the title office. We notify the lender and appraisal firm again that no collateralization is authorized. We notify Adult Protective Services and the State Fraud Unit because we have evidence of attempted capacity manipulation and attempted financial exploitation. We notify the insurance carrier and freeze changes. And we prepare the occupancy termination notice." Marlene's eyes flashed. "How much notice?" Bob's voice stayed even. "Under the trust license, it is not a landlord-tenant lease. It is a revocable permission. We can terminate with a short time period, a few days, enough to be fair, not enough to be useful to them." Hank leaned back, arms folded. "They tried to put you away, Walter. Fair is optional." I felt something in my chest tighten, then loosen like a knot finally giving up. I looked at the table and at the evidence and at the people sitting beside me, and I realized what had been missing for years: my own side. I said, "Do it, all of it." Bob did not celebrate. He simply opened his laptop and began drafting. He asked me questions, simple and sharp, full legal name, date of birth, in words addressed names of trustees. He explained options for the trustee: someone independent, someone who would not fold under family pressure. He offered a professional fiduciary firm he trusted. Marlene nodded firmly. "Do not pick anyone who goes to church with Vanessa's mother." I almost laughed, but the laugh died before it reached my throat. We chose a professional trustee, a firm with no social ties to my family, and Bob made sure the trust language was clear. I retained a life interest. I retained the right to live where I chose, and the trustee had the authority to terminate any occupant license if it threatened my welfare or finances. Ethan and Vanessa were not beneficiaries. There would be no inheritance for them through this property. The house would eventually fund the Claire Hayes Scholarship Foundation, which Bob had also been urging me to formalize a gift that would matter, a legacy that could not be twisted into a private loan for Pike Family Holdings. As Bob typed, my phone buzzed again. I glanced. A voicemail notification from Ethan, another from Vanessa, another from Loretta. Bob noticed. "Their panic is rising," he said. "That means their control is slipping." Hank leaned forward. "Let me hear one," he said. "I want to know what kind of tone your boy is using." Bob shook his head. "Not yet, not while we are drafting. Distractions are how you get sloppy." Marlene looked at me. "Walter, tell me something. Did Ethan ever talk about money lately, like he was desperate?" I thought back Thanksgiving dinner. Ethan talking too fast about a new venture. Vanessa's father patting his shoulder too hard. Loretta smiling like she already knew the ending. I remembered the way Ethan flinched when I said I wanted to review insurance policies after Claire died, as if the word review burned. "Yes," I said. He kept saying it was just a bridge loan, just temporary, like he was repeating a prayer. Marlene's mouth tightened. "That is how they talk when they are already in deep." Bob stopped typing for a moment. "There is another angle," he said. "The lender packet had a disbursement schedule to Pike Family Holdings. That looks like a funnel. If we can show they were planning to route funds to a related entity, we can support a fraud referral that brings real consequences." Hank's eyes narrowed. "Consequences is my favorite word tonight." Bob resumed typing, then printed documents, and the printer spat paper into the tray like the office itself was exhaling. Bob reviewed each line with me, translated legal language into plain truth, and when he was satisfied, he nodded at Hank and Marlene. "Witnesses," he said. I signed first. My hand was steady. Not because I felt no emotion, but because the emotion had finally been given direction. Hank signed, then Marlene, then Bob, notarized with the same notary, who had returned the steady woman who treated signatures like commitments and did not blink at the content. When the last page was sealed, Bob placed the trust packet into a secure folder and set it under his hand like a lid. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we record. Tonight we prepare service." "Service," Marlene repeated. "Like serving someone a bill." "Exactly," Bob said. He opened another document, the occupancy termination notice. He wrote it in clean language. He He did not insult Ethan. He did not mention the cruise. He did not vent. The law does not care about venting. The law cares about authority and notice. As he typed, Hank's phone buzzed. He checked it and grunted. "That your son Walter?" he asked. "No," I said. "He does not have Hank's number." Hank held up his screen. "Unknown number. Message says we should talk about Walter before you let him do anything he will regret." My skin went cold. Marlene leaned forward. "That is Vanessa's family." Bob's face hardened. "That is interference." Hank's hand tightened around the phone. "You want me to respond?" Bob shook his head. "Screenshot it and send it to me. Do not engage." Hank did, then put his phone face down like it disgusted him. I sat there and felt the truth settle in, not as a shock anymore, but as a landscape. They were not just scheming. They were organizing. They were reaching out, trying to control who stood beside me. They were trying to isolate me in real time. I looked at Bob. "Are we too late?" Bob met my eyes. "We are not late. We are exactly on time. Because they thought you would do nothing. The moment you moved, you changed the odds." My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, and this time, it was not Ethan. It was a notification from the cruise line, an email subject line I could read on the lock screen. "Urgent payment method required to avoid restriction of onboard privileges." I felt my stomach flip, not with joy, but with a grim sense of symmetry. They wanted a luxury cruise without me. They wanted only family. Now they were about to find out what it feels like when the money and the permission disappear at the same time. Marlene saw my face and leaned in. "That them." I nodded. Hank's mouth curled into something like satisfaction, but it was not cruel. It was the satisfaction of a man watching justice take shape. "Good," he said. "Let them sweat in their royal suite." Bob slid the printed notice toward me. "Walter, you need to decide one more thing. Do you want to call Ethan tonight and tell him it is over, or do you want him to learn through the system?" I stared at the paper. The thought of hearing Ethan's voice made my chest ache, but it also made my resolve harden, because hearing his voice would not change his choices. It would only give him a chance to manipulate, to bargain, to promise to delay. I shook my head. "No call. He gets the truth the way he gave it to me, through consequences." Bob nodded and began arranging electronic service clean, documented, time-stamped. He drafted a message to Ethan and Vanessa's known email addresses, a copy to Loretta, a copy to Pike's attorney, a copy to the bank security officer, and a copy to Adult Protective Services. Not because all of them needed it, but because paper trails are how you keep liars from rewriting history. Marlene watched him work, then looked at me, and her voice softened for the first time all night. "Walter, I am sorry. I am sorry you had to learn this like this." I swallowed. I always told myself it was normal family conflict. I told myself it was just stress, just money, just marriage strain. I did not want to admit I was being manipulated. I did not want to admit I could be fooled. Hank grunted. "Anyone can be fooled. The only shame is staying fooled." Bob's phone chimed. He checked it, then turned the screen toward me. "Confirmation from the lender," he said. "They froze the bridge loan. No disbursement." A small breath left me, and it felt like the first clean air I had taken in all day. Then Bob's printer whirred again, one last page, the final copy of the notice, the one we would post tomorrow. He handed it to me. "This is where the story changes," he said. "They tried to turn you into a confused old man. Tomorrow you become the man who took back the pen." My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a new voicemail notification, and the caller ID showed Ethan's name. I could almost hear his voice without playing it, the pleading, the fear, the sudden love he would claim he had always felt. I looked at the evidence at my sister, at my friend, at my attorney, and at the email subject line about payment required. I did not play the voicemail. Instead, I slid my phone face down on the table, and I let the silence hold, because tomorrow morning the deed would be recorded, the notice would be served, and somewhere out on the ocean, the first real crack in their perfect vacation was about to split wide open. Morning came with a thin gray light that made everything feel too honest, like there was nowhere left for anyone to hide, not in the paperwork, not in the stories, not in the sweet little lies we tell ourselves to avoid confrontation. I barely slept, not because I was afraid, but because my mind kept running the timeline like a precision checklist record. The deed, notify, the insurer, serve the notice, document, everything locked down, every door they once treated like a suggestion. Bob had offered his office couch, but I chose a small hotel a few blocks away, plain and quiet, the kind of place nobody would think to search when they wanted to find an old man to manipulate. When my phone alarm went off, I sat up before it finished buzzing. The screen was already crowded with new messages. 3 voicemails from Ethan, 2 from Vanessa, 1 from Loretta, a missed call from a number I did not know labeled restricted on the caller ID, as if the person calling believed hiding a number made them powerful. Then the cruise line email came in again, more blunt than the first one. Payment method required avoid restriction of onboard privileges. I stared at it a second longer than I should have, and a bitter thought slid through me. They wanted only family, but they still wanted my card. I met Bob, Marlene, and Hank outside the county recorder's office right when it opened. Bob carried the trust packet like it was a live wire. Hank carried his own quiet anger, the kind that did not shout, it just refused to bend. Marlene showed up with coffee for everyone and an extra set of eyes because she did not trust a morning that looked that calm. We went through the doors together. A clerk behind the counter recognized Bob, and that helped. People take you seriously when you walk in with a lawyer who knows the system and a sister who looks like she will bite. Bob did the talking short and clean, and within minutes the deed transfer into the trust was stamped, accepted, and queued for recording. The sound of that stamp was not loud, but it felt like a door shutting somewhere deep inside my chest. Marlene leaned close and whispered that right there is payback, the quiet kind, the kind they never see coming. I nodded, but I did not feel triumphant. I felt settled. There is a difference. Revenge is not always fireworks. Sometimes it is simply refusing to be used again. On the way out, my phone vibrated, and this time, it was a notification from my insurance carrier. Beneficiary change request flagged processing, paused fraud team assigned. Bob glanced at it and gave a small nod. Good. Now, if they try to turn your life into a lottery ticket, it becomes a criminal issue, not a family dispute. Family dispute. That phrase made me want to laugh, because it was always the phrase people used to excuse betrayal, as if blood automatically made cruelty forgivable. That was the toxic family myth I had lived under for too long. We drove straight from the recorder's office to the house, not Ethan's house, not Vanessa's house. My house, the one I had helped put up like a shield, and they had tried to use like a cage. The street was quiet, sprinklers ticking flags, hanging still neighbors, pretending not to look. Bob parked behind me, and Hank parked at the curb like he owned the whole block. Marlene stayed close, watching the windows, watching the corners, watching for any sign that Pike Family Holdings had sent someone to poke at the edges. Bob handed me a manila envelope. Inside was the occupancy termination notice, printed and signed, the language sharp but polite, the kind of polite that cuts. He said, "Remember, no speeches, no emotion. We post it, photograph it, we leave." I walked up to the front door with my heart steady and my hand firm. I taped the notice at eye level, right where Ethan's hand would reach the moment he came home, and expected the door to obey him. Then I stepped back and took photos from 3 angles, close, medium, wide, the house number in the frame, the date on my phone visible. Bob did the same. Hank stood beside me like a wall. Marlene muttered under her breath. Tables turned, and she said it like a prayer. We were halfway back to the cars when a voice came from across the street. "Walter." I stopped. A neighbor, Mr. Gaines, stepped off his porch, slowly older than me by a few years, the kind of man who had watched me carry groceries into this house and assumed I was the grandfather, not the owner. "You okay?" he asked, eyes flicking to the notice. I kept my voice calm. "I am handling a situation. If anyone asks, tell them to call my attorney." Mr. Gaines nodded once. I saw the curiosity, but I also saw respect. He was a man from the same generation, one that understood that sometimes family drama becomes a legal line in the sand. Back in the car, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was the cruise line, a push notification through the app I had used to book the trip. Onboard spending privileges restricted pending updated payment method. I stared at it, and something in me went still because I could picture Ethan reaching for a card with that confident little smile, Vanessa leaning back like she owned the ocean, and then the small humiliation of a polite employee saying, "There is an issue." Hank glanced over. "That them?" "Yes," I said. Marlene's mouth tightened. "Let them stew." But the universe was not finished stirring the pot. My phone rang again, restricted number. Bob lifted a hand, put it on speaker. I did, and a man's voice came through, smooth and rehearsed, the kind of voice that sounded expensive. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "this is Adrian Wells. I believe we have a scheduled evaluation in Juneau next week." My spine stiffened. The name that had been on the sticky note, the name in the email. Bob leaned forward slightly, voice calm. Mr. Wells, this is Bob Carter, counsel for Walter Hayes. You will cease contacting my client directly. Any communication goes through me. There was a pause, and then that same smooth voice tried to pivot. Of course. I simply wanted to confirm Mr. Hayes is still traveling, given recent concerns raised by his family. Concerns raised by his family. That phrase held a whole hidden truth inside it. Bob's voice stayed cold. There are no concerns. There is an ongoing investigation regarding attempted exploitation and manipulation. You have been identified as a party of interest in that investigation. If you contact Mr. Hayes again, we will file a complaint with the medical board and law enforcement. Another pause longer this time. Mr. Wells cleared his throat. Understood. Have a good day. The call ended. Marlene stared at me. They already sent their doctor after you. Not their doctor, I said quietly. Their weapon. Hank's jaw clenched. They do not get to point weapons at you anymore. We drove back to Bob's office to file the next round of paperwork. Bob sent a formal notice to Wells, to the cruise line, to the insurer, to the bank, to Adult Protective Services. He attached photos, timestamps, and the capacity packet, and he used a tone that told anyone reading it that this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a documented pattern of manipulation. While he typed, my phone lit up with a new voicemail, and the transcription preview showed Ethan's words without me having to hear his voice. Dad, please pick up, Dad. This is getting out of hand. Vanessa is freaking out. The ship says our cards are not working. We need you to fix this. Fix this. I felt something sharp behind my ribs, grief mixed with anger, not because he asked, but because he still believed the world was a machine that existed to serve him, and I was the maintenance man. Marlene leaned over and read the transcription, then scoffed. He does not even start with sorry. Hank said he starts with need. That tells you everything. Bob finished one email and started another. There is going to be an attempt today, he said. They are going to try emergency guardianship or a restraining order, something to paint you as unstable. That is their only play left. I asked, can they do it from a ship? Bob shrugged. They can try through family members, Loretta, Pike Family Holdings, anyone still on land. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed again, a message from Loretta, and even without opening it, I could feel the intent. Marlene snatched her own phone from her purse. Let me guess she is suddenly worried about your health. I opened Loretta's message and read it out loud, voice flat. Walter, sweetheart. We are very concerned. Ethan says you are having an episode. Please stop making impulsive decisions. Call me immediately so we can talk this through like family. Episode. The word made my stomach twist. It was the same script as Juno, the same script as Walter, the same script as putting me in a box labeled decline. Bob nodded. That is the phrase we needed. Save it. I saved it. Then Bob forwarded it straight into the evidence file with the rest. At noon, Bob received a call from a friend at the courthouse. He listened, said, thank you, hung up, and looked at me with the kind of face you do not want to see. They filed something, he said. Pike Family Holdings retained counsel. They submitted an emergency petition for protective oversight, claiming you were being financially exploited by an attorney and an unstable sister. Marlene's eyes flashed. Unstable sister, she repeated, and she laughed once, sharp and humorless. I have been paying my taxes on time since Nixon. Hank leaned forward. What does it mean? Bob held up a finger. It means we respond fast. I already anticipated it. We file your capacity packet, we file the evidence, and we request sanctions for bad faith. We also ask the judge to order them to preserve all communications and recordings, including whatever is on that device we found, because they tried to record Walter and manufacture confusion. Judge. The word landed heavy. This was not just family drama anymore. This was going to be a courtroom, and the only way to survive a courtroom is to be cleaner than the people trying to bury you. I said, do it. Bob typed like his life depended on it, and I watched his fingers fly, and I felt a strange gratitude for competence, for the kind of skill that does not care about feelings. It cares about outcomes. While he worked, my phone buzzed again with another cruise notification. Guest services request urgent, please contact ship support. I stared at it, and my mind filled in the blank. Ethan had gone to guest services. Vanessa had cried or yelled. They had probably tried to say I was confused, that I made a mistake, that they were victims. I did not call. I sat back in the chair and let the silence stretch, because the silence was mine now, not a punishment, not loneliness, just space. Then a new message came through, this one from a number I did not recognize, and it was a single line. This is Vanessa. I know you are reading. If you do not fix the payment by tonight, I will make sure everyone knows you are unfit and you will die alone. I read it twice. The threat was not even clever. It was raw. It was the real her, the woman who had spoken about slop and facilities and preserving capital for family needs. Marlene's voice went soft in a way that scared me more than her anger. "Walter, that is your hidden truth right there. Save it. Then we show it to the judge." Hank stared at the screen, then looked at me. "You want me to answer her?" "No," I said. "I want her to keep talking. People like her always think they are the smartest person in the room. They cannot resist leaving fingerprints." Bob nodded. "Exactly. Silence makes them panic. Panic makes them sloppy." The afternoon moved fast after that. Bob filed our response. He requested an expedited hearing. He attached the evidence and the chain of custody. He included Hank's proxy designation and Marlene's statement. He drafted a notice to Pike Council warning them to cease contact or face a restraining order. And then, just before 5, the courthouse clerk called back. Bob listened, then looked up at me. "Hearing is set for tomorrow morning," he said. "Same judge who handles guardianship petitions. She does not tolerate games." Tomorrow morning. My stomach tightened again, not fear, but the knowledge that the next day would decide how cleanly my life separated from theirs. Marlene reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. "You are not going in there alone." Hank nodded. "We walk in together. They wanted you isolated. They do not get that." My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a voicemail from Ethan, and the transcription preview caught my eye like a hook. "Dad, they will not let us off at the next port unless we pay Vanessa's talking to her father. He says you stole from us. Dad, please just call me. We can fix this. We can still be family." Family. He said it like a bargaining chip. I sat there in Bob's office, surrounded by paperwork and witnesses, and the strange comfort of people who stood on my side, and I realized something that hit harder than any insult. Ethan did not miss me. He missed access. He missed the old arrangement where he could treat me as a resource and still call it love. I picked up my phone and turned it face down again, and I focused on the one thing that mattered now. Tomorrow, in front of a judge, they were going to try to paint me as unfit, confused, easy to exploit. And tomorrow, I was going to show the court exactly who the real manipulators were, because the only thing more satisfying than revenge is justice that leaves a permanent record. The only thing more satisfying than revenge is justice that leaves a permanent record. And I learned that truth the next morning in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, where people came in whispering about family and left staring straight ahead like they had just watched a life crack open. We met outside the courthouse before the doors even opened. Bob was already there, suit-pressed, tie, perfect, a stack of folders in his arms like armor. Hank stood beside him in a plain button-down hands in his pockets, looking like the kind of man who would step between you and a moving truck without saying a word. Marlene arrived with a thermos and a face that promised she would not be polite to anyone who tried to call me confused. I wore my nicest wool coat, not because I cared about appearances, but because I wanted to look like what I was, an older man who still ran his own life, not a patient, not a child, not a soft target. My hands were steady. My mouth was dry. The hallway outside the courtroom already had a cluster of people waiting, and I spotted Loretta first. She stood with her purse clutched in both hands, lips pursed eyes, scanning me like she was hunting for signs of weakness she could report back to Ethan. Next to her was a man I had never met, tall, sleek, expensive, with that practiced smile you only see on people who make money turning other people's panic into contracts. Pike Family Holdings did not send their best intentions, they sent a litigator. And then I saw Vanessa's father, Calvin Pike, stepping out of the elevator like the building belonged to him. He carried himself like a banker who thought he was a king, hair too perfect, jaw set, eyes sharp. He did not look at me with concern. He looked at me like a line item. Loretta hurried over first, lowering her voice into that syrupy tone she used when she wanted to sound caring while cutting you at the knees. "Walter, sweetheart, thank God," she said. "We have been so worried. Ethan told me you have been acting erratic." Bob stepped forward, smoothly blocking her path with the casual precision of a man closing a door. "Ms. Wynne," he said, "any communication goes through counsel. You have already been instructed." Loretta blinked, offended. "I am family." "No," Bob said, "you are a petitioner." That word hit her like a slap. Her face tightened, and she glanced past Bob toward me, like she expected me to rescue her from the truth. I did not move. I did not apologize. I watched her realize she could not charm her way around a boundary that was finally written down. Calvin Pike approached next, and his smile widened, as if we were at a charity gala. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "it is good to see you up and about. I was afraid this might be a health issue." Hank made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. Health issue, he repeated under his breath. Calvin ignored him and looked at Bob. Counselor, he said, I want to be clear, this does not have to be adversarial. Ethan and Vanessa are just trying to protect Walter from undue influence. We have reason to believe there has been financial manipulation. Bob's voice stayed calm. The only manipulation documented here is the attempt to manufacture incapacity root money through your entity and isolate my client. We will present evidence to the court. Until then, you will not speak to Mr. Hayes directly. Calvin's smile tightened. He glanced at me finally and lowered his voice like he was giving advice. Walter, he said, men our age should not be making drastic decisions. You do not want to die alone. Let your family help you. There it was. The threat dressed up as concern. The same line Vanessa had texted me. Unfit. Alone. I met his eyes and kept my voice even. You should stop pretending this is about help. Calvin's gaze flickered just for a second, and I saw the annoyance behind the charm. Then he stepped back as the courtroom doors opened and the bailiff called us in. Inside the room was colder than the hallway and twice as quiet. The judge sat high face unreadable, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a voice that had heard every excuse. The clerk called the case My Name, followed by the words Protective Oversight Petition, and the phrase sounded like a net being thrown. The Pike attorney stood first. He spoke smoothly about concerns about sudden changes, about an elderly man making impulsive decisions, after a family conflict, about a sister with an agenda, about an attorney who stood to profit. He used words like vulnerable and safeguarding and best interests. Every sentence was designed to make me sound like a malfunctioning machine. I sat still and listened, and I felt the old habit in my bones, the habit of staying quiet, letting other people talk for me because it is easier than conflict. That habit had almost gotten me buried alive. I watched the judge's pen move slowly as she took notes. Then Bob stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not grandstand. He spoke like he was laying out bolts on a workbench, one at a time, clean and undeniable. Your Honor, he said this petition is not protection. It is retaliation and attempted exploitation. We have documentation of an organized effort to manufacture a finding of incapacity to redirect financial assets through a related corporate entity and to place Mr. Hayes in a facility for the purpose of preserving capital for other parties. The Pike attorney interrupted. Objection speculation. The judge held up a hand. Let him finish. Then you can object. Bob nodded once. He presented the capacity packet first. Medical proxy designation, independent witness statements, a current cognitive screening summary from Hank's primary care physician already scheduled legitimately and documented. Then he presented the timeline, the cruise text, the sudden exclusion, the immediate pressure from family members on land, the contact from Dr. Wells, the attempt to frame my decisions as episodes. The judge's eyes narrowed. Dr. Wells, she repeated. Are you telling me a clinician contacted the respondent based on a family report? Yes, Bob said, and we have the call record and the follow-up email. The clinician is also connected to the petitioner's network. The judge looked at the Pike attorney. Is Dr. Wells affiliated with your client's family? The attorney hesitated. He is a consultant. The judge's pen stopped, and he contacted the respondent directly, without counsel, based on alleged concerns. The attorney tried to smile. Your Honor, it was intended as a wellness check. The judge's voice hardened. This is not family court, and this is not a wellness spa. Marlene's hand squeezed my knee under the table. Hank leaned forward slightly, the smallest sign of readiness. Bob moved on to the evidence that mattered most. The receipts of intent, the recorded audio transcript, the capacity plan email, the insurance change request, the note instructing someone to keep me talking and call for evaluation. He did not play the whole recording. He quoted short parts and offered the full file to the judge in chambers because he understood the power of restraint. The judge looked down at the printed excerpt and read silently. Her mouth tightened as she hit the phrase, preserve the capital for family needs. Then the judge glanced at me. Mr. Hayes, she said, do you understand what this says? I kept my voice steady. I understand it better than they do. They thought I would not read it. The Pike attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, this is all being taken out of context. People say things in frustration. This is a family conflict. Bob did not flinch. It stopped being a family conflict when they drafted a petition to remove his rights, when they attempted to change insurance beneficiaries, and when they routed a bridge loan collateral package to Pike Family Holdings without authorization. That is not frustration. That is a plan. The judge's eyes snapped up. Bridge loan. Bob handed over the lender packet copy. It lists a disbursement schedule. It lists Pike Family Holdings as the destination entity for the majority of proceeds. It uses Mr. Hayes' home as implied collateral while it was still under his controlling interest. The lender froze the loan when notified. We have confirmation. We also have a fraud hold on the insurance request and bank alerts. The Pike attorney looked pale now, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the smooth mask. He tried to pivot again, to make it about me being angry, about me being impulsive, about me being vindictive. The judge let him speak for maybe 10 seconds, then cut him off. "Mr. Pike," she said, looking directly at Calvin's stand. Calvin stood still, trying to look composed. The judge's voice stayed flat. "You are not a party to this petition, yet you are here. Your entity appears in the financial documentation. You also appear to have sent messages attempting to influence witnesses. I have a screenshot of a message sent to Mr. Hank Dalton. Do you deny sending it?" Calvin's throat moved. "I did not personally send it." The judge did not blink. "Someone acting on your behalf did. In the future, you will not contact any witness in this matter. If you do, I will refer you for contempt. Do you understand?" Calvin nodded once, jaw clenched. Then the judge looked at Loretta. "Ms. Wynn, you will also refrain from direct contact with Mr. Hayes. Any further communication will go through counsel. Your message referring to an episode was inappropriate and suggests an intent to frame, not to assist." Loretta's lips parted, and for the first time, she looked like a person who realized she had stepped into a room that did not care about her stories. The judge leaned back, and the courtroom went so quiet I could hear the HVAC vent rattle. She studied me for a long moment. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "why did you make these changes now?" I inhaled slowly. "Because my son texted me that I was excluded from a cruise I paid for because his wife wanted only her family, and because while I was standing in my own kitchen trying to swallow that insult, I discovered paperwork that turned me into a problem to be managed. They did not want me as a father. They wanted me as an asset. I am 71 years old, and I am done being treated like a broken appliance." The Pike attorney scoffed softly. "Emotional testimony." The judge's eyes flashed. "It is also relevant. This court does not remove rights from competent adults because their adult children want control." She looked at Bob. "Mr. Carter, do you have any reason to believe Mr. Hayes lacks capacity today?" Bob's answer was simple. None. In fact, the evidence suggests the opposite. He has been precise, consistent, documented, and proactive. The judge nodded once, then looked at the Pike attorney. "This petition is denied," she said, "with prejudice." The words hit the room like a gavel strike even before the gavel came down. Denied with prejudice meant they could not come back with the same trick in a different outfit. The Pike attorney started to protest. "Your Honor, we request a stay pending appeal." The judge's voice hardened further. "No stay. Further, given the evidence presented, I am ordering preservation of all communications related to this matter. I am also referring the attempted insurance beneficiary change and the bridge loan collateral packet to the appropriate investigative agencies. Counsel will receive the referral numbers. Mr. Hayes, you are to be left alone." Left alone. That was what they claimed to want for me, but only on their terms. Now it was being ordered by a judge. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I felt something deeper, a quiet release like air finally moving through lungs that had been constricted for years. In the hallway afterward, Calvin Pike stormed past us, face tight, no longer pretending. Loretta hurried after him, whispering, trying to keep him from exploding. The Pike attorney avoided eye contact with Bob, as if competence itself offended him. And then from the other end of the hall, I heard Ethan's voice through a phone on speaker. "Dad, please. Vanessa is crying. Her father says the judge is corrupt. They are saying we are going to be investigated. Dad, fix this." It was coming from Loretta's phone, her holding it like a lifeline, trying to bait me into talking. Bob stepped in front of her and spoke loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. "Ms. Wynn, stop. Your petition was denied with prejudice. Any further contact is harassment." Loretta's face twisted and she hissed, "Walter, they are your children." I looked at her and felt a surprising calm. "No," I said. "They are adults making adult choices." Then I walked away with Hank and Marlene and Bob down the courthouse steps into bright daylight that felt almost unreal. In the car, my phone buzzed again. And this time, it was not a voicemail, it was the cruise line app. Guest services update: security has restricted suite access pending settlement of onboard account. Hank let out a low whistle. Looks like their luxury vacation just got smaller. Marlene turned to me, eyes sharp. You ready for the next part? I stared out the window at the street sliding by, and I pictured Ethan and Vanessa on that ship, the doors that no longer opened for them, the payments they could not make, the panic blooming as the ocean kept them trapped. I said yes, because now it was not just about stopping their plan. Now it was about finishing mine and making sure that when they finally stepped off that cruise, they would learn what being excluded really felt like. Because now it was not just about stopping their plan. Now it was about finishing mine and making sure that when they finally stepped off that cruise, they would learn what being excluded really felt like. I did not go home after the courthouse, not right away. I drove past the old neighborhood like a man passing a graveyard, respectful, quiet, but not tempted to step inside. The house that used to hold my wife's laughter, the house that once felt like my final station, was no longer a place I owed my heart to. It was an asset in a trust, a structure protected by paper and law, and if that sounds cold, it is only because warmth gets you exploited when you are dealing with people who confuse kindness with weakness. Bob called the cruise line from his office while I sat in the parking lot with Hank and Marlene. He put it on speaker and kept his voice professional, not angry, not dramatic, just firm. The agent on the other end was polite in that trained way, but I could hear the strain underneath it because cruise employees deal with entitlement the way paramedics deal with blood routine, constant, exhausting. Mr. Carter, the agent said, we can confirm there is an outstanding onboard balance and a restriction on suite access due to the primary payment method being declined. Bob said, confirm which name is listed as the responsible party for the folio. There was a pause. Ethan Hayes is listed as responsible, sir. Bob said, good. Please email confirmation in writing. Also confirm that Walter Hayes is not financially responsible for any charges made on board after the date his payment authorization was revoked. The agent hesitated, then said, we can provide that statement, yes. Bob thanked him, ended the call, then looked at me through the windshield like he was checking if I understood the weight of what we had just done. That paper trail matters, he said. It prevents them from trying to shove their debt back onto you later. I nodded. Let them own their own mess. Marlene leaned back in her seat and let out a long breath. I want to see their faces when they get off that boat, she said. I want to see the moment they realize the world does not bend for them anymore. Hank said we might, depending on what happens next. What happened next came faster than I expected, and it did not come from Ethan. It came from Vanessa. She found a way around the blocks, or maybe she borrowed someone else's phone because my screen lit up with an unfamiliar number and a message that was not pleading, not apologetic, just furious. You psychopath, it read. You ruined everything. My dad says you set us up. We are trapped. I swear to God I will take you for everything. I stared at the words until they blurred, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed something clean and simple. She was not afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing access. Bob asked, screenshot. I did. Then I sent it to him. Marlene shook her head. She talks like she's still holding the leash. Hank's voice stayed low. She is going to learn the leash is gone, and she is the one tied to the post. That afternoon, I did something I should have done years earlier. I went to my storage unit, the one with my wife's quilts, my photos, the little pieces of a life that were mine and not theirs. I stood in that cool concrete space with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and I opened a box labeled kitchen, and there it was my wife's old recipe binder, stained, worn, filled with handwriting and smudged notes. I ran my hand over the cover and felt the ache rise up, the grief I had shoved down because survival required steel. I had been so focused on betrayal, on litigation, on revenge, that I had not allowed myself to sit with what mattered most, the quiet truth that my wife was gone, and the only reason I tolerated their disrespect, for as long as I did, was because I thought I was protecting her legacy. They had tried to steal her legacy and turn it into a funding source for their lifestyle. That was the real betrayal. Not the cruise, not the text. The idea that her life and my life were just a pile of assets to be harvested. I closed the binder and looked around the unit. There was a folding chair in the corner, cheap and wobbly. I sat down on it and let my breath slow. For a few minutes, I allowed myself to be an old man with a broken heart, not an opponent in a legal fight. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a notification from the lender fraud unit that Bob had contacted. They had opened a case. Another notification from my insurer confirming the beneficiary change request remained frozen pending investigation. Another from the bank, confirming my accounts were locked down with new authentication and that no third party could access them without in-person verification. Layer by layer, the foundation I had built my whole life was becoming mine again. The cruise sailed on without me, but it did not sail on without consequences. Every day, Bob received an update from the cruise line, all written, all documented, no access to suite, restricted onboard spending security notice issued. Ethan and Vanessa were not just embarrassed, they were contained stuck on a floating city where every transaction was tracked, and every attempt to charm their way out of a bill only made staff colder. Marlene called me one evening, voice tight with satisfaction. "You will love this." She had a friend who worked in travel insurance claims, and through that friend, she heard the rumor the ship had flagged Ethan and Vanessa as high-risk guests. Not criminals, not yet, but the kind of guests staff whisper about, the ones who lie, who threaten, who try to press their problems onto anyone nearby. For the first time in a long time, I laughed. It was not cruel, it was relieved. Reputation matters to people like them. They live on appearances. Nothing breaks them faster than being seen clearly. The day the ship returned, I was not at the port. I was in a quiet motel 2 hours away with a good view of a lake, a place where nobody would think to look for me. Hank stayed nearby, not hovering, just present. Bob was ready with his filings. Marlene had her phone charged, like she was waiting for the final episode of a show she had suffered through for years. Bob called me mid-morning. "They are off the ship," he said. "They are trying to get to the house." I did not feel excitement. I felt a deep calm. This was the last step, the final turn of the screw. The trust's property manager had changed the locks 2 days earlier and posted a notice. The notice was not dramatic. It did not need to be. It was simply the truth, printed on paper: new ownership, no trespassing contact information for the trust's counsel. Ethan and Vanessa arrived anyway. They brought Vanessa's parents with them because people like them always try to bring an audience, as if witnesses can rewrite reality. Marlene had arranged to be down the street with her car parked discreetly, and she filmed from her dashboard. She sent me the video in 3 parts, and I watched it sitting on that motel bed with the curtains half drawn, watching the sun glint off the lake as if the world had never known betrayal. Ethan looked smaller than he ever had. Not physically, just in the way his shoulders sagged and the way he kept glancing around, like he expected someone to step out and rescue him. Vanessa looked furious, hair pulled back too tight, jaw-clenched eyes, darting toward every neighbor window, as if she was daring the world to judge her. Calvin Pike stood behind her, stiff, trying to maintain control, but I could see the frustration leaking out of him too. Ethan walked up to the door and tried his key. It did not work. He tried again, harder, like force could convince metal. Then he stepped back and looked at the notice. He read it, and I saw his mouth open slightly, his brain catching up to the reality his ego refused to accept. Vanessa yanked the paper off the door and crumpled it as if destroying the paper would destroy the truth. She started pounding on the door, shouting words I could not hear through the video, but I could read her body language: blame, rage, entitlement. A property manager stepped out from the side yard with a clipboard. He kept a careful distance. He said something, held out a hand, like he was directing traffic. Vanessa pointed at him, then at Ethan, then at the house. Ethan raised his hands in a pleading gesture like he was negotiating with a machine. Calvin moved forward, chest out, and the manager did not flinch. The manager pointed at the notice again, then pointed toward the sidewalk, then took out his phone, calm, professional, ready to call law enforcement if needed. Vanessa turned toward the street and screamed, and that is when a neighbor stepped out, not to help her, but to watch. Then another neighbor, then another. People love a spectacle, but what they love even more is seeing the bully finally meet a wall. Ethan's face turned red. He looked like he might cry. He looked at Vanessa, and she snapped at him, and then he snapped back. I could not hear the words, but I could see the moment the marriage cracked, because when the money vanished, all they had left was each other, and they did not like what they saw. Then something else happened, something I had not planned for, and yet it felt like karma with perfect timing. 2 cars pulled up behind them. Not police, not a tow truck, 2 plain vehicles. 2 men got out and walked toward Ethan with folders in their hands. Bob had warned me this might happen. The lender fraud unit had moved quickly. The insurance investigation had flagged more than a beneficiary change. They had traced attempted account access. They had traced communications. They had traced the bridge loan packet. Ethan looked at those men and went pale. Vanessa turned and grabbed his arm, shouting, but one of the men held up a badge and spoke calmly. Ethan took a step back, then another. Then he stopped because there was nowhere left to retreat. Marlene's video cut off there, but she called me immediately afterward, voice shaking not with fear, but with satisfaction. So pure, it sounded like relief. Walter, she said they served him right there. Papers questions, fraud investigation, all of it. And Vanessa was screaming like a banshee, and Calvin kept trying to talk his way out of it. But those men did not care about his money. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. It was done. Not just the revenge part, the part that mattered, the part where the world reflected their actions back at them with no pity and no softness. Bob called again an hour later. Ethan has retained counsel, he said. Vanessa's father is furious. They are trying to claim you orchestrated everything out of spite. I asked, and Bob's voice held a small edge of satisfaction. And it does not matter. You acted within your rights, documented everything, and the judge already denied the petition with prejudice. Their threats are noise, now not leverage. I hung up and sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the lake outside the motel window. The water moved in small ripples. A bird skimmed the surface. The world kept going. I thought about Ethan as a child running barefoot on my porch, holding a fishing rod too big for his hands. I thought about the first time he said Dad with real love in his voice. I thought about how proud I was when he got into business school, how I told my wife we did it. We gave him a life where he would not have to grind himself into the ground like we did. And then I thought about the text message. Plans changed. You are not coming. My wife wants only family. That was the moment he made his choice. It was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. It was betrayal, clean and simple, and betrayal demands a response that teaches the lesson permanently, because anything less becomes permission. I did not feel joy watching them panic. I felt closure. I felt my dignity come back like a limb regaining blood flow after years of numbness. Later that evening, Hank sat across from me at the motel's little table eating a simple dinner grilled chicken green beans, the kind of meal that keeps you alive and does not pretend to be special. He looked up and asked quietly, "You going to talk to him if he calls again?" I shook my head. Not now. Maybe not ever. Marlene called one last time before bed. She had been quiet for a moment on the line, then she said, "I think you did the right thing, and I know you are not enjoying the pain, but I want you to understand something. You are not cruel. You are finally fair." After I hung up, I took my wife's recipe binder out of my bag and set it on the table. I ran my fingers over the cover again and whispered her name, not as a plea, not as a performance, but as a private promise. "I'm going to protect what we built," I said, not with anger, but with boundaries. The next morning I drove out of town, not running, leaving. There is a difference. I went north toward places where the air was cooler and the people did not know my name, and for the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten was possible: freedom. If you are listening to this and you have ever been treated like an ATM by the people who swear they love you, I want you to hear me. Clearly, love does not require you to be exploited. Loyalty does not mean letting someone drain you dry, and family is not a free pass to betray you without consequences. If this story hit a nerve hit, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and subscribe if you believe respect is non-negotiable, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not screaming, it is walking away with your dignity intact.